Alrighty, good morning, everybody. We are here with Ted, who's gonna walk us through the annual report here, and he knows his stuff, and most of you know him, so I am sure he needs no introduction, but he is here to bless us on a Saturday morning. And I'll keep an eye on the chat if you want to send in any questions. Otherwise, we will go ahead and get started here.
All right, thank you very much, Grace. As Grace said, I'm Ted with the Iowa Department of Management. We handle budget and AFR and urban renewal report questions. All of those reports are coming this time of year. So if you have questions on any of those or GASB 77, which you should be currently doing, if you are a TIF using city, if you're not a TIF using city, you don't need to worry about GASB 77. But if you have questions on any of that stuff, I'm your guy. We're going to talk this morning about the city annual financial report in total. So this is a session on the full report. There is one new piece of the report, city debt details page, which we'll go over towards the end of the presentation. So if you're interested in only that piece and you don't want to sit through the rest of the full AFR presentation, there is a webinar that was recorded on last Thursday, I believe, actually, August 7th, that is up on the league's website. And if you need a link to that, you can ask Grace or Mickey, and they'll be able to provide you with a link to that and the slide presentation from that. Today, like I said, we're going to go over the full AFR. We're going to start fairly basic. So I know from looking at the list, some of you are a little bit tenured. Or at least have done one of these at some point in the past. So bear with me while we go through the very basic stuff, and then we'll get into kind of a page-by-page breakdown of what needs to go into the annual financial report. If you have questions, put them in the Q&A when you have them, and then Grace will stop me as we go along, where I'll find some stopping points and ask about questions, and then we'll get them answered. So that's the best way to handle that. So the annual financial report, the most basic thing we could say about the annual financial report is that it is a report of all of the fiscal activity of the previous fiscal year. So the annual financial report that just opened, you should have received an email from me a couple of days ago saying that the AFR is now open. It would have been Monday afternoon that it opened up. The AFR covers July 1, 2024 through June 30, 2025. That's the one we're currently doing. So our fiscal years in Iowa run from July 1 through June 30. We always refer to the fiscal year by the last year of the fiscal year. This fiscal year that we're reporting is technically fiscal year 24-25, but hardly anyone will ever say that. We'll just refer to it as fiscal year 25. And so get used to that kind of strange dichotomy there of it being 2 years, but we only use 1 year when we refer to it. Also, you're going to be working in 3 years at one time. So get used to that, because you're almost always putting your fingers into 3 years at a time. The current year that you're in, recording the comings and goings of the current year, reporting on what happened last year, and then budgeting for the next year. So you're always going to be a little bit into 3 years, but don't get confused by that. For the AFR, we're looking backward. We're looking at last year that ended on June 30 and reporting all of the actual revenues, expenditures, and balances by fund and by line. And this means all departments of the city. So you can see that last little code section there, 38420. All departments of the city have to keep account on the AFR and on the budget. So I bring this up because a lot of small cities will often have trouble with fire departments and libraries not understanding that they are also part of the city. They have their own checkbook, they have their own board, so they think that they're separate from the city. They are not. All of their revenues, expenditures, and balances also need to be recorded on the AFR. That being said, your library and your fire department may also have a 501c3 organization, a not-for-profit fundraising organization that is separate from the city, a Friends of the Library or a Friends of the Fire Department organization. Those organizations do not have to report on the AFR. That money is separate until they donate it to the city, and it does not have to be tracked by the city or reported by the city until it has been donated. That being said, no public money should ever go to the financing arm, to the 501c3. That should be kept on the city's books according to 38420. So again, like I said, July 1 through June 30 is the fiscal year in Iowa. That's for the state, for the city, for the school, for the county. All local governments are on a July 1 through June 30 fiscal year. We need to know your balances by fund, so you want to keep a cash balance in your accounting ledger. And then we need to know also the balance of your checking, savings, and all of your investment accounts and CDs as well, which is what we refer to as your bank balance. So there's two separate balances that we report on this report. One, on expenditures page 9, is what we call your fund balance. So your fund balance is at the end of the year in your accounting software or on your ledger book, how much money did you have left at the end of the year? Your bank balance is all of your money that you had in your bank accounts, again, checking, savings, investments, and CDs at the end of the year. These two will differ a little bit in a cash basis city. They'll differ a lot in an accrual basis accounting city. But in a cash basis city, which most of you guys probably are, because 95% of the cities in Iowa report on cash basis. In a cash basis city where you record revenues and expenditures when they happen, not when they're earned, you will have some difference. Your bank balance at the end of the year will probably be slightly higher than your ledger balance or your fund balance because of outstanding checks that you've written but have not been cashed. So bear that in mind when you're trying to get to your ending balance. Like I said, we're going to be reporting all revenues, all expenditures. And then also this year, debt balances outstanding and paid. We always reported debt balances on the AFR in the past, although we aggregated totals and put them into one page, other P10, and do a long-term debt matrix. We're now going to be taking those balances and putting them into a couple of extra pages. It's called the city debt detail pages, and it's going to be a little bit more granular. So now we're going to start asking you for debt balances, outstanding, initial balances, and some other information by individual debts. So it will start to look a little bit more like the long-term debt page of the budget. So that the long-term debt page of the budget and the city debt detail page on the AFR will be very similar. City debt detail page on the AFR is going to ask you for a few more things, so bear that in mind. AFR is due by December 1st of each year. There are penalties that can apply if you submit a late AFR. They don't apply right away, but we still want you to have it in by December 1st each year, as there's other reporting that has to be done based on the AFR that we now have to do per state code. So I want you to get it in as close to December 1 or on December 1 as you possibly can. And again, late submission does potentially carry a financial penalty if you go too far. The penalty for a late submission of an AFR is you are not able to start your budget hearing process until your AFR is submitted. So that means that any hearings that you do before your AFR is submitted for your next year's budget are void and you have to redo them. So it can then force your budget to be late, and if your budget is late, we will chop off some of your property tax revenue for the next fiscal year. So that's where the financial penalty can come in. So just make sure you're getting your AFR done and submitted on December 1st of every year. Council review is not legally required for the AFR. Since it's a statement of actuals, there's not really anything for the council to approve per se, but it's still a good idea to have your council review this either before or after submission. It can happen after submission. That's just fine. So if you want to do the AFR, get it published or posted, and then have the council review it after that, that's A-okay. If you want them to do it before that, you got to plan ahead and make sure that you hit your December 1st deadline. But either way, we strongly encourage you to present your council with the AFR once it's been completed, either before or after submission. You can do it after submission, and then if somebody finds a mistake in it or you have a change that needs to be made, we have until the end of the current fiscal year, so from December 1st through June 30 to make an adjustment to that AFR if needed. So we can do an amendment to the AFR if something's found in review. So just bear that in mind as well. Okay, let's walk through the AFR system a little bit. We're gonna talk a little bit about the basics of navigating. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen. I'm in our test system for the AFR. So it's might be a little bit more interesting rather than going slide by slide, but I will present you with the slides as well so that you'll have those after the fact. But I'm gonna go through the system kind of a little bit more of a live walkthrough in parts, and then we'll go back to the slides kind of back and forth. So our system Our actual system, I go to that, you can see the web address up here is dom-localgov.iowa.gov. So the AFR system and the budget, the AFR and the budget, excuse me, are in the same system. So if you've done the budget in the spring, you're coming into the same system and you're using the same login to get into the AFR system. I'm going to go into our test system so I don't wreck anybody's AFR as they're working on it. There's when you get to dom-localgov.iowa.gov, there's a little login button here in the top left. That's where you're going to do your logging in. Right down here, there is a section where you can get to the prior year's reports. So if I want to look at a prior year's annual financial report, if I'm new to my city, and I want to look at what was filed last year, which would be the 2024 fiscal year report, and let's say I'm City of Algona, because that's who we're going to use as an example here in the test system. I can go in there, I can find the prior years all the way back to 2019, and then I can view it in here as well, or come in and print a copy. Okay, there's always a print button once I go inside the AFR, or I can just view it on my screen, but I'm allowed to print it as well. Okay, so it'll come up ready to print. But that is just public information and it's only prior years. So when you see this annual financial report search, if it says search on the end of it, that means it's prior years and it's not an editable copy, it's for public consumption. So you'll need to log in first before you can go to the editable copy. So I'm gonna hit log in, and it's gonna bring me to a screen that looks like this. So this is my login screen, it's a big blue block. You'll see up at the top, there's some options as well. So if I have a username and password that's already assigned to my city, I just come here and I enter them and I click sign in and I'm good to go. If I don't have an account, I can click on create an account and I can put in my first name and my last name. So I'll put in my first name, put in my last name, click register, and it'll bring me through a self-guided process where I can set up an account for myself. I've already obviously got an account, so I'm not gonna set one up. But it'll default to a username that is your first dot your last name. If you don't want to use that, or if it's already taken, you can edit this to be whatever you want it to be. So I can instead make this state of Iowa instead, and it will accept that if it's not already been taken. So that's perfectly editable. You can make it whatever you want. So if you want to make a more generic username to be passed on when you leave your city, or for multiple people at the city to use, you can do city.of, whatever, at Iowa ID. We'll always end it at Iowa ID. So that's how you know if you've got an account or not. It'll always say at Iowa ID at the end. The user account for the AFR and the budget is also the same user account you use for several other things in the state of Iowa reporting system, like your street finance report. We use the exact same login ID that you use for a street finance report, which you're doing right now. Same login ID that you use for IPERS, same login ID that you use for some stuff with Department of Revenue or Iowa Economic Development Authority. So that's our single sign-in ends in at Iowa ID, and everybody should have their own individual one. If you don't have one, walk through this process, and the slides that I'll provide you will have some information on it about how to walk through that process. And if you don't have a user ID and you're having trouble with it, just contact me directly and I'll help you with a new set of instructions to help you get through that. But I can't set one up for you directly. You have to go through our self-guided process. Once you have your username, and I have attached your username to a city, you will come and enter that username here. So there's my test account, and then you enter the password that you have set up for that account. I knew I typed it wrong. Oops. Type my other one. All right, and sign in, and there we go. So once you sign in through the system, you're going to see a blank screen like this, right? It says home at the top, and it doesn't say much else. Okay, that's okay. This is where we want to be. We want to be where it says home and then a bunch of white space. Because on the left-hand side, you can say it says hello, and it gives my name first and last. In this case, I say user test for my last name. And then down here gives us some options. The number one thing I want to see is local budgets, this gray piece right here. If it says local budgets on the left-hand side, I've gotten to the right spot. I've logged in and I have access to my city's reports. Right down under local budgets, there's budgets, amendments, and then annual financial reports, parentheses, AFRs. This is the one we want to click to get to our editable AFR report. So I'm going to click on that, annual financial report, AFRs. So it's going to give you just your city. Like I said, we're going to use City of Algoma as our example. So when you come in, it'll look like this, if you're only attached to one city. Some of you part-time clerks, I know, do more than one city. So you will see all of the cities that you're attached to in a list. My user account is attached to 3 different cities for testing. So when I came in and I didn't have Algona, it shows all 3. So I've got Algona, Ames, and West Des Moines listed there because I'm attached to all 3. But if I'm just the city clerk for one of the cities, I will just see all of the previously submitted reports and the current new report for the city that I'm attached to. So at the top, it automatically filters newest to oldest. So at the top, it says 2025 for fiscal year. That's the one we're going to be currently doing. And when you come in, this status right here will say new. That's perfect. That's right where we want you. New means I have not entered anything in saved information in the AFR, right? Right now, my status shows as in progress because you can see on August 8th at 9:59 a.m., I did some testing in here. So that moved it from new to in progress because I have saved information in it at some point. Once we get past in progress and I've completed my AFR, it will change to published. When I see published, that means I have completed the electronic version and submitted it, right? You still have to submit documents after that, but this will mean that in the online system, you're done. You've submitted what you need to submit. Over here to the left, there is a blue edit button. So I'm going to click the blue edit button next to the 2025 AFR to get into the current year's annual financial report that we're reporting for December 1. Okay? Once I get in, you should see something that looks similar to this. It'll drop you in on the All Funds P1 page, which is your, that's your summary page that fills in from other pages. So the All Fund P1 page, there's not much information that you have to enter on here until you get to the end of the AFR. Most of it fills in from stuff you're going to do on other pages, information that you're going to enter on other pages. The other thing you'll notice is you still have a navigation bar on the left-hand side. So that takes up a lot of space. If I'm in my report and I don't plan on leaving my report anytime soon, I can click these little gray arrows up here at the top. So on the top left, there's these little gray double chevrons pointing out that that I can click. So if I click the little gray double chevrons, it takes that navigation pane away and makes my page much wider so that I can see everything right to left on the page. That's something you're going to want to do. You will probably also want to make sure that you have you could see I was holding my control button and then scrolling with my mouse click wheel. When I do that, it'll allow me to change the zoom on my internet browser window. So if I go up to 100, I can still see, so you'll be defaulted to 100. But if I go to 100 on the All Funds P1 page, doesn't matter. I can still see everything left to right. But if I go to like expenditures page 2, and I scroll down a bit, you can see I've got hidden columns now. So if I zoom it out to about 80 or 85%, that'll give me the entire screen. I can see everything left to right, all of the columns. So between closing your navigation pane and then zooming out to 80, that will get you where you want to be in terms of being able to see all of the columns left to right. The important thing to remember is that you do not stop your left to right entry until you see the grand total column. That is the very last column on the right. That needs to be, that one, you don't have to deal with it. It's a summary of the other columns. But they're proprietary right here, proprietary column H, does have some entry points. And if I'm zoomed out to 100, you can see I don't see proprietary. So I've got to use this slide bar to get over to proprietary. So there is a slide bar at the bottom that will move me left to right. There is a scroll bar up top, or on the right, excuse me, that will move me top to bottom. So you've got a slide bar to move you left to right at the bottom of the screen, and you have to scroll down to the bottom of the screen. You see if I'm up here, I've got no slide bar. But if I take this outside scroll bar and I go all the way down to the bottom, my slide bar is back, okay? So you gotta make sure that you're paying attention to where you're at on the screen. Better yet, just zoom it out to 80, and then you don't have to worry about any right to left, you just have to worry about the up and down, okay? You'll see there's lots of tabs. These are each a page of the AFR. So there's four pages of revenues, page 2 through page 5. There are 5 pages of, or 4 pages of expenditures too, excuse me, page 6 through page 9. There's 1 page of miscellaneous summary information, which is other P10. And then there's a page that is debt. And this has multiple pages actually, because we give you 20 spots to enter debts per page, and then we give you 6 pages. So you can see there's these sub tabs down below where you can enter more debts should you need to. Most of you will stay on LT Debt 1, which is where it defaults to when you click on City Debt Detail. But we'll go over that in greater detail here in a few minutes. Up along the top, you'll see there's several buttons. So just again, for navigating pages, you just click on the blue ones. If it's a blue, you can go to it. If it's black with the little tab over it, it's where you are. So, and also on most of the pages, there's a header, boom, to tell you which page you're on, okay? Up top, there's buttons that are going to help you along the way. Number 1 is instructions. If I click on the instructions button, and it won't do it in test because I'm in the test system, I don't have the proper instructions loaded up, but what it'll do is it'll open a new tab like this, it'll run for a second, and then it will display or automatically download the PDF copy of the instructions. So I have new instructions out there for this year that include instructions on the new upload system for documents and the new City Debt Detail tab. So even if you have an old set of instructions, trash those and grab the new one because there's new information in there that you're going to need. But I change the instructions every year, and the new instructions are always under the instructions button. Once you click it, depending on the settings of your system, it'll either pop out in a new tab that you can scroll and print from, or it will automatically download that PDF file. It just depends on how you have your internet browser settings. The publish posting button is here, and it will be gray when you initially come in because you can't click the publish posting button until you have entered information into the system. Even after I've started entering information into the system, if I click on the publish posting button, it'll run through it, it'll do an error check, and then it's going to tell me, whoops, you can't publish your AFR yet because you have all of these errors that you need to figure out, okay? So that publish posting button, you won't click until you're done and you've entered everything you need to enter into your AFR. The documents button here, likewise, is for after you've completed your AFR. So if you complete your AFR and you're ready to upload your signed All Funds P1 page in your proof of publication or posting, that's when you use the documents button. So there's 2 ways to provide the signed documents to the Auditor of State's office, because ultimately this, even though I run the report at Department of Management, the ones who are responsible for its long-term storage and its review is the Auditor of State's office. This is technically their report. I just help them out because I have the tools to collect it. So we kind of work together on this jointly to get all these AFRs in. So that brings up another key point. If you are late with your AFR, you may hear from the Auditor of State's office. A lady named Zamira over at the Auditor of State's office may be emailing you. That is a legitimate email if she's asking you, where's your AFR and you're late. So respond to her as though you're responding to me because she's my counterpart at Auditor of State who helps me with the AFRs and getting those in. But once you have completed your AFR and you're trying to provide your signed copies, 2 ways you can do that. You can mail it to the Auditor of State's office here at the Capitol, and there will be, in the instructions, there's a mailing address for where you can mail it to. And there's a mailing address, I believe, later in the slides as well that you'll be provided. The other option that you can do is you can upload it through here. You can sign it, scan it, and upload it into our system. And we'll go through the upload system in a little bit more detail later, but just know that's what the document button is for. The documents button is to provide us with the signed copies of the AFR that when you're done with it. Over here, this orange button is very important. It's your check errors button. So your check errors button will find any errors that we can find. So like our system can check for errors in balancing. It can check for errors in not having information where we think you should have it. It can't tell me, is this right or wrong? So if you want to know whether or not your AFR is right or wrong, or if you have specific questions about it, that's when you should be talking to me. I obviously can't review your AFR for rightness or wrongness without your internal documents. But if you balance at the end of the day, that should be, if your AFR shows the same ending balance by fund as your internal accounting docs, you're probably good. then you can submit it. This will only find issues where there's not a number where there should be a number, some things don't balance, or you have gone below 0. So you can see the 3 errors that come up right away is you haven't entered an amount of wages, salary and wages on other P10. So we need that number to be in there. So it says, all right, you're missing this number. You're also missing an ending balance. You don't have a bank balance entered. So this is your bank balance as of the end of the year of 0. That seems weird, you need to be corrected. And then it also states that you have no beginning balance that was entered on line 134 of revenues page 5. So you've left the beginning balance blank, you've left your bank balance blank, and you've left your wages and salaries blank. Those are just 3 of the errors that actually exist on this system. There's a waterfall kind of chart that the error check goes through, and it finds the most obvious ones first, and then it works from there to say, all right, are there less obvious errors? But if these are wrong, it stops you right there and says, hey, you can't move forward until you fix these. You can click the error check button at any time throughout the process. The nice part about it is the error check will first save your report. So the first thing it does when I click error checks, it doesn't do it right now because I just saved it when I did the publish posting, so it's already in save mode. But if I go through, and let's say I just enter in transit, I enter a 1, and then I do my error check, first thing it's gonna do is it's gonna say saving. I'm gonna save it. And then the next thing it'll do is it'll check for errors. So you gotta give it a second, and then boom. All right, now I've entered a number, so now it starts looking for more items, and you can see more errors have popped up because I entered that one number. But also, it means that the number that I entered did get saved. So that's the nice part about error check is it automatically saves before it does your error check. The save button is the most important button in the entire top of the screen because we want you to save often. It only takes, you can see it takes about 5-10 seconds every time you save, depending on how much information you have and how many users you have that are in the system. Right now I'm in the test system, and the test system actually runs a little slower than our production system. So the production system will probably save twice as fast as this. But in the test system, it saves pretty quickly, you can see. So every time you're gonna move from page to page. So let's say I'm done filling out revenues page 2, and I wanna move to revenues page 3. Before I move there, I should click save, right? If I get up to leave my desk, I click save. So if I'm in a 1-person office, and I have to wait on the counter, and I have to answer phone calls, and I have to deal with people's questions, I need to click save before I leave and change my focus any direction. Even if I'm just getting up to run to the bathroom quick and I'll be back in 2 minutes, still save, because you just never know along the way someone's gonna stop you and ask you a question, or someone's gonna come to the counter, or you're gonna have a phone call. So make sure anytime you're gonna leave your desk or you're gonna shift your focus away from the report, before you do that, you need to save, because our system will time you out. This is a system that has 5,000 possible users at any given time. I think we're actually more close to 6,000 at this point, because we have 3,000 separate local governments that can submit a report in this system at any one time, and they each have multiple users, or some, I shouldn't say each, but about a third of them have multiple users. So we could have technically about 6,000 people in here at any given time working on their reports. That's a lot of data to go through our servers. We have, we're not Microsoft, we are not Google, we only have a limited amount of computing power that we're allowed. So we have to not have an autosave, right? Ideally, when I was designing the system with my colleagues, Carrie and John, we were going to put in an autosave, but our IT staff says you can't do that. The Hoover building will literally explode if you try to put in an autosave function. So we have to instead time you out after an hour. So if you're in here for 55 minutes, you'll see a bar come up across the top of the screen. It'll be an orange bar across the top of the screen that says, hey, you're about to be kicked out in 5 minutes. And it'll start a countdown clock. You'll see it, it'll go start at 5 minutes and it'll count backwards all the way to 0. Next to it is a refresh button. It says, if you don't want to get kicked out after this many minutes, you need to click the refresh. And I need you to click on the word refresh in that orange bar in order to save from being kicked out. You can refresh it. As long as you refresh it every 55 minutes, you can stay in the system as long as you want. But if you do not refresh at the 55-minute mark, anything that you have not saved will be lost because there's no autosave function. Okay, so you need to click save early, click save often. Like I said, it only takes a couple of seconds for you to click the save button and for it to do its thing, and then it'll put you right back where you were and you can move on with your life from there. Okay? Over here next to save is the print button. So if I click the little drop down arrow next to print, I've got a couple of options, and these options will grow by one as you get to publish posting. It'll also bring in a publication copy. But right now, just right off the bat, I've got two options. I can print the current page that I'm on. Current tab means current page, so I can print revenue P2 by itself. Or I can print the full AFR. So if I select print full AFR, it'll again save my work. It automatically saves when I do that. And then it's going to bring up a print window and say, all right, you wanted to print the entire AFR. How do you want to go about doing that? So I've got a couple of options. I can do my printer. So this is my office printer here at the Capitol. I can do save as PDF. So if I want to save a PDF copy, and that's generally what I do, is I want to do a save as PDF copy. Or it might say save to PDF or save PDF or Microsoft save to PDF. There's a couple of different variations. Since I'm in Google Chrome for my browser, it's save as PDF, okay? So if I go there and I click save to PDF, then I can pick pages that I want. I want all of them. I want one page per sheet. Margins leave to default. But one thing I want you to do is I want you to click off headers and footers so that it's empty, so that box is empty. Because you can see it takes all that little wording. If I leave it on, there will be little words at the top and the bottom that mean nothing to you, right? Date and time, the fact that it came from our system, and then some script about where you got it. Doesn't matter. You don't need that. And it looks much more presentable if you take that off. But I do want you to click and make sure background graphics is clicked, because what this does, you can see, is it brings in some shading to help people see line to line to line. If I take that off, it's just a blank white background, right? And nothing to delineate one section from another. If I put it back on, now all of a sudden I've got some shading in the cells, I've got shading in the headers, and it makes it a little bit easier to delineate one section from another. So headers and footers off, background graphics on, and if you click the save button, then it will allow you to save a copy of the PDF. I would always do that and then print from the PDF, because internet printing can vary wildly depending on your system settings and your printer locally. So if you save it as a PDF, you're going to have a much better time printing it, and then you can also have an electronic copy that you can email around as needed, right? Okay. So Grace, any questions before we move on to the actual entering of data into the AFR?
Nope, we've got no questions in the chat so far.
Okay, great. So we're going to go on and we're going to move into entering some information into this AFR. So let me skip ahead quick. All right. All right. Right here you can see. All right, so each page has cells on it. And some of the cells are white backgrounded, some of the cells are blue backgrounded. Okay? If it has a blue background, that is a space into which you can enter numbers. Okay? There's a lot of blue cells, and there will be blue cells under every column. Some pages you won't get any blue cells, like you can see in the screenshot at the bottom. When I'm on revenues page 2, I only get a couple of blue cells under my TIF special revenue fund and under my proprietary fund. There's a lot of white, because legally I can only enter numbers into certain cells under that fund on this page. We try to control it so that we don't have you illegally entering numbers by accident. So the blue cells guide you to places where you legally can put a number. That does not mean that you have to enter a number into every blue cell. Most of you will enter numbers into only like a quarter or a fifth of the blue cells, especially if you're a smaller city. So if you're a smaller rural city, I would expect to fill no more than 1/4 of the available blue cells. And I'm probably only going to fill in general, special revenue, maybe TIF, maybe debt service, and then proprietary possibly if I own my own utilities, okay? Even the largest cities in Iowa, like Des Moines, only fills in like 2/3 to 3/4 of the cell. Nobody fills in all of them. So stop yourself from the compulsion of feeling like you need to put a number in every single blue cell. You do not. You don't need to fill in most of them. You're going to have a lot of blank space when you're done, and that is fine. As you go from blue cell to blue cell, there's only 2 ways that you can move. Number 1 is you can move by using your mouse. So I can click into any blue cell that I want to be in, or I can click tab. So if I am in my general property tax, and you can see it also to help be helpful, the header of the column and the header of the row will light up green just to show you where you are. So this tells me I'm in the general column and I'm on the taxes levied on property line. But if I want to, let's say I've entered my 150,000 worth of property taxes under general and I want to move along, I can either click into the special revenue and then enter my taxes, and then enter my taxes there, or I can press my tab key on my keyboard. If I press tab, it will go along to the right and then it will go down, okay? So it'll move me right first and then down to the next available cell, okay? And I can do that all the way down the page, boom, 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 all the way down the page, okay? And then when I get down toward the bottom of the page, there are spaces where I can put in my own row header. Right here on line 21, you can see it's got a blank space where I can type in whatever miscellaneous thing I feel like typing in, right? So that will allow me to go into there, and then when I hit tab out of that, it'll keep going, okay? So tab moves you to the right and then down. Otherwise, if I want to get somewhere quickly, boom, I can use my mouse. What I cannot do is use my directional keys. So I'm pushing all of my directional keys, my arrows, and it's not going to get me anywhere. It'll just move me within the cell. So if I put in a number and then use my directional keys, it'll move me along the number that I've entered. So that's, you have to use either tab or a mouse click to get you where you want to go inside the system. Okay. Again, here is the orange bar, just a representation of what that's going to look like. We'll see it at some point in my presentation because I've already been logged in for like 30 minutes. So it's going to come up at some point and show its orange head. I just hope I'm in there when it happens and it doesn't kick me out. Although it might be good for you to see me get kicked out because I do also, like you, forget sometimes to be there when it's a 55-minute marker. I can't be. I've been called away or I'm on the phone and I'll get kicked out myself. So it's not just you who has to say it constantly. It's me as well if I'm helping somebody with theirs or if I'm working in the test system. So make sure that you don't ignore this. And again, you have to click right on that renew word, right? We couldn't make a button, excuse me. We could not make a button inside that header ribbon. It wouldn't allow, the system wouldn't allow it. So it's just a bolded word. But make sure you're clicking right on the word renew and not just inside the orange bar, because that won't do anything if you do it inside the orange bar. Up along the top of each of the pages, from revenue page 2 through expenditures page 9, there is a header with a radio button that shows what type of accounting basis you're reporting under. If you are a tiny city, if you are a city of less than at least 5,000 people, you are reporting on cash basis, guaranteed. Because there's no reason for any small cities to report on accrual basis. You're never audited. Most cities, the only reason for them to report on what we call GAAP or accrual basis is if they want to get a certification that they're meeting governmental, the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA. If they want to get accreditation through the GFOA to show that they are using the appropriate practices for accrual-based accounting. Like that's the only reason to do it. You're not seeking that, cash basis is much easier for your life. Because like I said earlier, GAAP, you record expenditures and revenues when they're earned. So if I have somebody who does road work for me and they do it in March, I would record that road work then instead of in June when I get the bill. If you're in cash basis, you don't record it until you get and pay that bill. So I don't record that expenditure until I sign and send the check. That's when it's recorded. I don't record my property taxes until the month I receive them, okay? Because you usually receive your property taxes 1 month after they're paid. So I would enter cash basis, receive the revenue I receive from the county treasurer in August, I record in August. If I'm under accrual, I record that in July. There's no reason to do accrual if you don't have to. Stay with cash basis. If you switch your recording, if you switch your accounting methodology or your recording methodology, switch your button at the top. It will always default to the prior year. So if I marked cash basis or GAAP basis in the prior year, it will keep that until I change it. So I don't have to do this from year to year unless I make a change, okay? So make sure that, for most of you, it means you don't need to even look at this. You're on cash basis, Just make sure it shows cash basis and you'll be fine. If you're accrual, make sure it says accrual basis and you're fine, you're ready to go, okay? We have a chart of accounts that we offer. It is not legally required to be used. Again, this is another thing where we strongly encourage, but we can't legally require. But we have a chart of accounts right there, dom.iowa.gov, under local government and city resources, under the forms and templates section of the page, forms and templates. There is a uniform chart of accounts, is how it's stated. City uniform chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is it's kind of like the Dewey Decimal System for accounting, right? It gives you a way to track easily where the revenues and expenditures are in your system, which fund they are in, why they are there, so what are they going towards, which program of the city, which expenditure program or function of the city are they supporting, and then why did we receive them, or why did they get spent? So there's a 3-digit code for fund, there's a 3-digit or 4-digit code for purpose, so for what we call program, so what is it, which of the city's functions is this supporting, and then there's a 4-digit code at the end for how is it being spent. So you can see down at the bottom, there's an example of what a chart of accounts number would look like. So we have 001-110-6010. This is an expenditure. I know that because the last 4 digits end in 6. If it started in 6, excuse me. If the last 4 digits started in 4, I would know that this is a revenue. Revenues have a 4-digit code at the end. Expenditures, number 4 with 4 digits at the end, and expenditures have a 4-digit code with a 6 beginning at the end. So this is an expenditure. It's an expenditure of the police department. I know that because it says in the middle, 110 is my program code or my function ID. It's 110. You may also see 1010 if you use the 4-digit code way of doing it. I always like the 3-digit code because I'm into brevity. I like short numbers. So I know that this was spent out of my general fund because it's 001 at the beginning. That's general. Anything beginning in 0 is going to be general fund. Then it's 110, so I know it's police protection, and then it's 6010. I know that that is full-time wages. So this is paying for a police officer or a member of the police department administrative staff. So these are wages. So this chart of accounts gives you a quick and easy way to record your revenues and expenditures and be able to easily organize them by function or by purpose. It also will help you do your AFR rather rapidly. Okay, so there is a method to the madness, essentially, of what these columns mean. So these columns align with our chart of accounts, and our chart of accounts numbers align with these columns. So you can see up at the top, it did an overlay of the chart of accounts fund numbers and which column they line up with. So like I said, if you have a general fund, the numbers are 0 through 001 through 099. That's general fund. So if my fund number in my accounting software, in my chart of accounts, is 001 through 099, I know I'm putting that revenue or expenditure under the general fund column of my AFR. 100 level goes under special revenue, except for 125 through 144, which goes into TIF special revenue, super special revenue. 200 through 299 goes under debt service. 300 to 399 is capital projects. We skip 400 and go to 500. So 500 to 599 is permanent fund. Then we go to 600 and up, so 600 through 900 goes through the proprietary fund. So that just tells you which column each of your revenues or expenditures go into using our chart of accounts. So if you're not currently using our chart of accounts, I would strongly suggest you switch to it if possible, because it'll make your life much easier when you go to budget or when you go to do the AFR, because all of those numbers are meant to align with these columns, okay? Again, most of you small cities, you're only going to use some of the funds. Well, I can't say nobody. There are cities that use all of them, but it's not many. 3/4 of cities in Iowa will use somewhere between 2 and 4 of these fund numbers, or of these fund columns. Only the bigger cities will use all of them. So make sure the most important thing about this report, even above, there's 2 super important things, but the most important thing is make sure that your beginning balance, your revenues total, your expenditures total, and your ending balance tie to what you have in your books, so that the AFR matches what you have in your books in big totals, okay, in totals. The second most important thing is make sure that you get your revenues and expenditures into the correct column, into the correct fund, okay? Super important. If you get those two things correct, everything else will kind of fall into place, or is easily correctable in future years. So just make sure you focus on those two things. Right? There again is the list of fund numbers and which columns they go into. Okay, oops. All right, let's start talking about revenues pages on the AFR. So there are 4 pages of revenues page 2 through revenues page 5. All of you will at least have to put information into revenues page 5, revenues page 2, and revenues page 3 for sure. Because there are revenues page 2 is where most of your tax information goes, property taxes. Revenues page 5 is where your beginning fund balances go. Never leave that blank. And then revenues page 3 is where your road use tax goes. And every city gets road use tax. So you will use at least those 3 pages for revenues. Okay. Revenues page 2, like I said, is mostly property taxes. Okay. So for revenues page 2, we're going to have a lot of taxes that you have to enter on those pages, but it also includes some other stuff. So you can see up at the top, section A is your property tax, okay? So line 2 here, you're going to put in taxes levied on property, and that's going to be property taxes that you received from the county treasurer during the fiscal year. So make sure you're tracking your property taxes by fund, okay? Certain taxes go into certain funds. Your consolidated general fund levy or general levy down through your ag land levy on your budget page, on your budget property tax pages, all of those levies. So that would be general levy, aviation authority, your public transit company, your property casualty, tort liability insurance, support of a local emergency management commission, unified law enforcement if you have that, and then ag land levy. All of those levies together go under the general fund, okay? Your employee benefits levies, which are next, police and fire retirement, FICA and IPERS, and your other employee benefits. All of those together go under special revenue fund. If you are a city that has a special a self-supporting municipal improvement district, SMID is what we call them, a self-supporting municipal improvement district. Those funds also go into special revenue. They have their own fund under there. If you are a TIF user, TIF is line 5. The only place you can put TIF revenues is under the TIF fund. So we put our on line 7, excuse me, we put it on line 7 here. So make sure you're putting that in the right spot. Further down the page of your budget, you have the capital projects levy. Your capital project or capital improvement reserve levy, which is a voted levy that not all of you have. Very few cities actually have it, like 30 cities, I think, have the capital improvement reserve levy. That would go here under capital projects, okay? If you have the debt service levy, if you're using the general obligation debt service levy to repay debts of the city, the revenue off of that, property tax revenue off of that goes into column D here, debt service on line 2. So that's where you put all of your property tax revenue. Line 2. Line 3 is where you put money that you don't think you're going to collect out of the property tax, or money that you didn't collect for the property tax for the year. If you are a cash basis city, ignore line 3. Even if you're a gap city, you're probably going to ignore line 3. It's just there for those who want to make it match their budget essentially. So they're going to put in their budgeted amount of property taxes levied minus anything they didn't receive, and then their net current property taxes will show up on line 4. But for the most part, leave line 3 blank. Especially don't mess with it if you don't understand it. I don't generally like to see numbers there because it's kind of pointless. But it's, again, that's an accrual accounting thing. So if you're a cash basis, you don't have to deal with it. Line 5 is for people who delineate their property taxes by year really strictly. So basically, your property tax year starts in September. So the statements for fiscal year 26 that we're currently in, I just received my property tax statement, my property taxes due statement this week. I actually received it a couple of days ago. So we're mid-August right now. I don't have to pay that until the end of September is when my first payment would be due. So September 30, I'd have to make half of my property tax payment for the year. March 31st, I make the other half. So you don't start collecting property taxes for FY26 until October, really. So anything you collect in property taxes from July through September is actually from the prior year. You can enter those delinquent property taxes here on line 5. If if you do not track your delinquent property taxes separate of your regular property taxes, which you do not have to do, it is not required. But if you do not track delinquent property taxes separately, then you just include all of your property taxes up here on line 2. If you do track your delinquent property taxes, taxes that were due in the prior year that you received in the current year, you'd put those on line 5. Okay, then that all adds together and we get your total property taxes on line 6. Okay? Like I said, line 7 is your TIF special revenue property taxes for the year. So if you use tax increment financing, which is TIF, to fund projects and you get that money from the county treasurer each month, those totals go into this cell right here under the TIF special revenue fund. And you can see on line 7, there is only one fund under which you can enter TIF revenue, and that's in the TIF special revenue fund. It's not legal to put it anywhere else. So that's all of our property taxes. Now we have the things that are property tax substitutes or other taxes levied by the city. So lines 8 through 14 here are going to be other taxes that the city can levy. Doesn't necessarily mean your city will. First thing up is the utility tax replacement excise tax. So this is taxes that is a property tax equivalent that you get from gas and electric companies. A lot of times when you get your monthly statements from the county treasurer, you will see this come in as either gas and electric, G&E, utility replacement, or util replace. That's how it'll show up on your statement. Those items go into this line. They are not strictly speaking property taxes. They are what we call a property tax equivalent. Gas and electric companies are taxed based on the amount of power they transmit, not the amount of property that they own, because their property never sells. We don't have a comparable way to really value that property. So instead, we tax them in different ways for how much power they transmit in each area. So utility replacement excise taxes, track that separately, put it on line 8, and it comes in separately on your monthly statements from your county treasurer that you get. It'll be either be marked gas and electric, G&E, or utility replacement, or it might say utility replacement excise taxes if they are very thorough. But that's what that is. Down below that, there's a utility franchise tax. This is your franchise fees. Okay, so there's no spot on the AFR or on the budget that says franchise fees. Utility franchise tax or franchise tax. This is where you put any revenue that you gain from your franchise fees. Okay, that can be in many different funds. So you've got spaces, but most of the time it'll go into general. Parimutuel wager tax was taxes on racing, on gambled races. So horse racing and dog racing. Now, dog racing, I don't believe exists in Iowa anymore, or it might be down to one track. So you're not going to get much tax off of that anymore unless you are in Polk County and you get some from Prairie Meadows for their horse racing. That's about it. So parimutuel wager tax is a thing of the past. It's still here because it still technically can be collected and reported. Most of you, this will be not used. Gaming wager tax is if you've got a casino in your county, you may get some of the gaming wager tax off of that. So some of the bigger cities, or even mid-sized cities now that have casinos, they will have some gaming wager tax that gets entered here. Most of you will not. Mobile home tax is the separate tax that you get from mobile homes, because mobile homes are not taxed on their value. They are taxed on their square footage. So it's not technically a property tax as much as it is a size tax or a space tax. It's really just an area tax. So your mobile home tax is based on square footage. So we separate it out from your property taxes. Now, I got the question after our last presentation, because I would say you should separate mobile home tax from property tax. And they will come in separate on your statement from the county. But I had a city ask me, in the past, she was relatively new. She's only been clerk for like 2 years in this town. And she asked me, the city in the past has just lumped them all together, lumped the mobile home tax in with the taxes levied on property on line 2. Do I need to split it out now? No, not necessarily. I just would like you to split it out because it's good to know how much of it's coming from your mobile home parks, so that it should one get sold and demolished, you'll know how much revenue that you're going to be losing for the city. You'll gain it back with whatever they replace it, but for a few years there, it's going to be just bare ground getting taxed. So you're going to lose a little bit of revenue from mobile home tax. So it's good to know it separately. If you don't have any worries like that, or you're not interested in that, you can lump it all together with property tax. If that's what they've been doing in the past, I really have no problem with that, but it's best to put it on its own line. okay? Hotel motel tax is money you get from the state. You'll get hotel motel tax directly from the state if you have passed a hotel motel ordinance inside your city allowing for the use of that tax. It's voted, and then you have to pass an ordinance, so it has to go through the citizens. This money generally goes into the general fund and then gets dispersed from there. Per 420, what is it, 423A, I think, of the Iowa Code is what covers hotel motel. It states that you have to put it into the general fund. Why? I don't know. I got that question the other day too. I have no clue. You'd have to ask the legislator to pass that, why it has to go to the general fund. But it does. But then it can be dispersed to other areas. And there are some instances of older hotel motels where you can put it into other funds. That's why we allow you other areas to enter that into. But that is the money received from the state that was gained from collection of taxes on people lodgers staying inside your city, if you have the hotel motel tax in place. A lot of cities don't have hotel motel tax. The next one, other local option taxes, is your local option sales tax. So if you have lost revenues inside your city, this is where you put your monthly payment from the state. If you're brand new to city government, your local option sales tax and your hotel motel taxes generally show up in the middle of the month. And so your hotel motel tax and your local option sales tax will come in, at the beginning or end of the month, lost and hotel motel come in, usually end of the month. So we're talking the 25th through the 30th or 31st, but sometimes it will bleed over into the beginning of the next month. So if you see a payment from the state that comes in after the 25th or before the 5th, that's usually local option sales tax and hotel motel tax, okay? So those taxes go into this space. So make sure you're keeping them separate and that you're recording them separately. But those come in late or early in the month. Your road use tax will come in mid-month. So anywhere from the 13th through the 18th, that gets paid by the Treasurer of State's office mid-month. Local option and hotel motel gets paid by the Department of Revenue late month, or sometimes bleeds over into early month. But make sure that you're recording those in the correct areas. Most of the time, your loss is going to go into special revenue because the loss fund is number 121. It is a special revenue fund. So make sure that you are recording that under the correct column and then dispersing it from there. There are some cases where loss gets split. So if you have like a revenue purpose statement, because remember when you vote in loss, you also have to vote in the purposes for which it can be spent. And usually there's some language in there that'll say a portion of the lost funds can go for either any lawful purpose or for community betterment or for property tax reduction. If you get those, that usually means general fund. You should still bring it into the lost fund in special revenue and then transfer it to general. But some cities for years have been splitting it and putting the 50% that goes to any lawful purpose into general and then the rest of it into special revenue. If your city does that, that's fine. I'm not going to fault you for that. You can continue to do that. But if you are, the proper way to do it is to put it into special revenue and then split it from there. Licenses and permits is going to be money that you gain from the sale of licenses or permits inside your city. So if you are selling dog licenses, building permits, alcohol or tobacco sales permits, the money gained from that goes on line 16. Right below it on lines 18 through 21, this is where we put money that we've gained from either property that we own or money that we're holding in account. So the use of money and property, it's your interest payments on accounts that you have in the bank or investments that you've made like CDs. And then it's also rents and royalties. So if I own a piece of land and they put a cell phone tower or a windmill on that piece of land, and then the city gets paid a rental fee each month or each year for having that sited there, then that goes under rents and royalties. But this can also be, if the city owns cabins at a lake that's near the city that gets rented out, those rents and royalties would go here. Community center rents would go here, that sort of thing, or building rents, equipment rents, all of those, anything that you rent out that you own, that you're not selling, you're just renting out, goes on line 19. There's a spot for other on line 20 here. There's a bunch of different other uses of money and property that you can have, but for most part, you'll either be on 18 or 19. It'll either be money that you've gotten in the form of interest from accounts that you have, or rents or royalties that you received for loaning out your land, buildings, or equipment. Okay? Those are all either directly or indirectly coming from property tax or other taxes. Down below, starting with line 27, we move into the realm of intergovernmental, okay? Intergovernmental is money that
Can I
I
hop in real
receive.
quick?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Grace.
All right, we have a question before we get into the next section about if Airbnbs qualify for the hotel motel tax.
Oh, geez, I'd have to look that up because there's been so many bills whizzing past in the legislature over the last years that I think I probably have confused myself. I believe there is some tax they have to pay, but I'm not exactly sure the particulars of it. I think, Grace, I think the league has a write-up on that somewhere, recently. So you might wanna, if you have questions about Airbnbs inside your city, I would suggest you talk to Grace or Mickey, because I think they have a write-up on it. Otherwise, email me the question and I'll do the research on it. I don't, in my head, I know I'm conflating like 5 different bills from the last few years that have been about Airbnbs in particular. It's been a hot topic, especially in like the Okoboji area where a lot of homes have been turned into Airbnbs, and it's really put a crunch on their housing market. So if you have questions about Airbnbs, check the league's website is the first thing I would say. Go to the league, iowaleague.org. In the top search menu, type in either Airbnb or short-term rentals are also what those are referred to as. So you can put it in there and I bet it will bring something up. If not, shoot me the question and I'll answer you.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate it.
No problem. Gives me a chance to get a drink. Okay. Intergovernmental is part D, and it starts here with lines 27 through 32. Intergovernmental is money that's moving between one section of the government and another. Okay, there's 4 different levels to this. So there is federal grants and reimbursements, which is where we start. Then there's state shared revenues, which is money that comes into the state that gets paid back to you, but it's not the state's money, it's collected for a specific purpose, really. That's the road use tax fund. Okay, so that's state shared revenues. Then there's other state grants and reimbursements, and then there's local grants and reimbursements. We'll go through these one at a time. But no, those collectively are intergovernmental monies, and that's money moving from another form of government to you, to your city. So federal grants and reimbursements is pretty straightforward. It's any money that the federal government either directly gives you or indirectly gives you. So this could be money from FEMA, federal level FEMA. This could be money from a community development block grant or CDBG. I know the state gives you that money through the Iowa Economic Development Agency, but the money ultimately comes from the federal government. The federal government just has us be the middlemen, the managers, because they don't want to have someone in every single state doling out this money. So they give the block grant to the state and says, here's a set of parameters you have to follow, but you figure out who gets this money. So it's ultimately federal money. Some of you may have HUD money for housing. So housing and urban development is HUD. So you may get grants for affordable housing. That would go here on line 29. Any public assistance grants that you get that's for like social services or for indigent housing or refugee programs, things like that that you get from the federal government, that goes here under public assistance grants. If you have a federal courthouse or federal buildings inside your city, or even like a federal park or federal land, you may get what we call a pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. That's a payment that one government will give to another government because their property is tax exempt, but they still give you money for things like fire protection, police protection, things like that you're providing to them, even though they don't pay any property tax. So you may have a pilot agreement or payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the federal government where you get money from that goes here. Most of your stuff will go on line 27, federal grants. So if you get a grant from like the state revolving fund program, an SRF grant, that's technically can be federal money. If you get a USDA grant, that's definitely federal money. Depending on which program it is, SRF could be federal money, it could be state money, it just depends, but the SRF will tell you what it is. But federal grants, if you get a USDA rural development grant, that would go here on federal grants. If you got ARPA monies in the past, that went here. What else recently did we have? At some point, you may get injected some money from the infrastructure bill that passed a couple of years ago. That would go here on federal grants as well. That's kind of a catch-all, but then we have the specific programs down below. So just make sure you're putting it on the line in association. But the important thing is this all comes from the federal government, okay? we flip to revenues, page 3, we continue our intergovernmental, but now we're at the state level, okay? So state shared revenues is first, and that's road use tax dollars. Only one spot where you can put road use tax dollars. It goes into your 110 fund. Your special revenue fund 110 is road use tax. That's where you should always put it. Legally, that's the only place you can deposit it, so we only give you one stall to enter that money. But that's your road use tax payments that you get in the middle of each month, okay? Down below, we have state grants. So this would be things like RISE or REAP, even though you would go even more particular, like your REAP grant comes from DNR. So you would put REAP there. You may get a state level highway funding or road funding for a specific project where you get a grant from the DOT. That goes here. Money that you get from the Economic Development Agency, or the Economic Development Authority, excuse me, the Iowa Economic Development Authority, IEDA. Anything you get there that's not CDBG goes on this line. Remember, CDBGs, or Community Development Block Grants, are federal dollars, so they go on page 2 under the Community Development Block Grants line. But anything else that you get from the Iowa Economic Development Authority would go here. The commercial and industrial replacement, and what we used to call the business property tax credit. Some people, I mean, most of us still call it business property tax credit, but now it's actually called Tier 1 business tax replacement. Those two you get from the state of Iowa. You get those twice a year. You get it in November, like October, November, depending on when your county sends it to you. And then you'll get it in March or April, again, depending on. So you'll get half in the fall, half in the spring. Those two get added together because it'll be 2 separate payments, one for commercial and industrial replacement and one for Tier 1 business property tax replacement. Those two get added together and added to line 54, okay? For some of you, FY26 will be your last year getting C&I replacement. Just remember that, because you may be what was called a non-qualified city when they started that program that only got it for 5 years. Some of you will get it for 3 more years if you were what was considered qualified. So just bear that in mind. But this is FY25, everybody got it, so that you'll add those 2 totals here and you'll put it on line 54. Then we give you a bunch of blank spaces. We give you 5 lines where you can enter other money that you got from the state. And this is just from the state of Iowa. Cities do not get much money from the state of Iowa, okay? Most city money comes from either the federal level or from the local level as far as intergovernmental money is concerned. The only thing that cities reliably get from the state is road use tax right here, okay? Otherwise, the state doesn't give cities much money. So you're not probably gonna have a lot to go in there. You'll get road use tax and you'll get C&I replacement and Tier 1 business property tax. So those 2 lines, lines 44 and 54, should be filled out every year, at least for now. Local grants and reimbursements, 63 through 69, is money that you got from other local governments. So that's county, city, township, or school. So if you got anything that is below the state level, if you got money from any of those governments, it goes in here, okay? The most common money you're gonna get here is your county contributions for library service for rural citizens. So if your city has a library, the county will give you some money to pay for rural citizens using the library, citizens who don't live inside the city, who live out in the country, using the library, so get that here. You may also get money from your county here for joint projects that you're doing, or for farm to market roads or transfer of jurisdiction money for streets. You could get money from the county. You could put it here. If you get farm to market or transfer of jurisdiction funds, you can either put it here under county contributions or up under road use tax money, because ultimately that comes from the road use tax fund. So either one is fine. Library service, here you would enter if other cities are paying you for use of your library, that's where this would go. Township contributions would be if your township is paying you for library service. Usually townships do not pay for library service. The county covers it for the townships. They tax for it separately. So usually you won't get any township contributions for library, but you may get
Ted, you're cutting out really bad.
What's that? Oh, am I cutting out? Grace, can you hear me? Are you guys able to hear me now? Hopefully. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So township contributions, usually it's gonna be library related. It could also be for some other function, you know, if you share a township, if you allow them to use your city hall as a township hall, they may give you some money for that. What I want you to do is put fire separate. So fire and EMT service from townships, I would put it on a separate line and call it fire EMT service. So a lot of times, the city fire department will provide service to the townships, to the unincorporated populations around the city. If that's the case, the township will give you some of their property tax revenue to offset the cost of that. That goes under fire EMT service, and it has to be entered on line 66 or line 65, but I'd prefer it on line 66 if possible. And then you have some blank spaces again. If you get money from the school or from the county in a weird way, or from another city, and you want to delineate it specifically so you know what it is, you've got lines 67 through 69. But again, this is money coming from the county, the city, another city, a school, or a township. You're going to put under local grants and reimbursements. That is all intergovernmental. Okay. After intergovernmental, we go into charges and fees for service. So these are items where you are collecting a fee for a service that is being provided. So these are self-funded activities. The main examples of that are utility activity, water, sewer, gas, electric. If you're doing one of these and it's fee supported, and if you have a utility, it has to support itself. It has to be fee supported. So if you're bringing in a user fee for a service you are providing, it goes down here. Okay. There's a line for each individual type of fee that you can you could possibly collect. Now, we put half of them at the bottom of page 3. The other half go on revenues page 4 at the top. So don't get thrown by that. Make sure you're addressing both pages and that you're putting all of that on the appropriate line. Okay. What I will point out is down here under other, lines 89 through 90, through 101, there we go. 89 through 101, we have some delineated odds and ends. So if you have any of the, like if you charge a fire service fee for responding to a fire, if you charge an ambulance fee for having a service call on an ambulance, if you have a sidewalk repair program that you charge a fee for that is not a special assessment, we have places for some of these other odds and ends. A big one is cemetery charges. So if you take in money for burial plots in your cemetery or for upkeep of the cemetery, it would go in there. If you take it in from the citizens as a user fee. Library charges would be, this is if you are having a service that gets provided that the library pays for. This is not like fines for late overdue books or anything like that. That would go under miscellaneous. But if you have like programs that charge a fee for the program usage and through your library or through your parks and rec, then those would go here. Okay, that's charges and fees for services, stuff that's self-supporting. Special assessments are when you did a project in a specific area of your city, and you were able to assess a fee to those citizens that were benefited the most. You collect it like property tax, so it goes to the county treasurer. They put it on the property tax statement for those citizens, and then you collect it at property tax time. Those special assessments should get separated out and put onto line 106. They're not used often, but at some point in the past, most cities have probably used a special assessment in some way, but it's not used terribly often. Miscellaneous is kind of a catch-all area. So if you don't know, if it doesn't fit anything else, put it under miscellaneous. The things that do have to go under miscellaneous are, first thing, contributions. So if you got donations from a private source, so this isn't a federal grant or a state grant or something like that, but if you got a donation or a grant from a 501c3 in your area, like the Iowa West Foundation, or like the Des Moines Partnership, or the Central Iowa, I forget what they call it, Central Iowa Partnership, or your Chamber of Commerce or something like that, that would go here because they're not governmental agencies. They're giving you a grant, but they're a 501c3. Casino foundations, perfect example. If you had a casino foundation that gave you money to fund a project, it goes here under contributions. You have a private citizen that donates money to the city, it goes here under contributions. Next down, also under contributions would be if you received a payout from an insurance claim. So you had the roof of your town hall was blown off and you had to have it replaced. You put a claim into your insurance company. They gave you money back to cover that claim. The revenue from them paying you for the claim goes here under contributions. That's a big one. Deposits and sales or fuel tax refunds go here. So this is mainly going to be deposits, and especially under proprietary here, this is going to be deposits on utilities. So when you start, when a new user starts in your utility, you generally take a deposit from them of either a set amount or what's equal to the first month's bill, and that deposit gets kept until they leave the system, and then you give it back to them. You hold it in trust. If you get deposit revenue, goes here. It can also be a deposit on a community center for rentals or things like that. So if it's a deposit, it goes here. Sale of property and merchandise is if it's a small item. We're not talking what is termed real property. So real property would be vehicles, buildings, heavy equipment. But if you're selling something, if you're selling merchandise, so this is a lot of times if you're selling like yard waste stickers or yard waste bags, those are the most common ones. Or if you're selling like t-shirts for your city or something like that, some kind of memorabilia, that would all go here, those smaller items. It could also be if you are running a concession stand for your Parks and Rec area, the sales of that concession stand could go here because you're selling merchandise. Any fines that are levied by your city go on 111. This is anything from police fines like tickets, or parking tickets, or building code violation fines, but it could be all the way down to like library late book overdue fines. That would go here as well. Any fine that the city levies for breaking an administrative rule or code violation would go here. And then internal service charges, most of you will not use. But you can see line 113 through 119, there is plenty of space to put in individualized items that you want to give a header to. You can over here, you can overwrite this and type in anything you want as far as a header to tell you what that specific miscellaneous revenue is. We give you plenty of space to kind of put in the puzzle pieces that don't fit anywhere else. Okay. Revenues page 5 is where we have all of our, what we call other financing sources. It's our one-time monies that don't come in very often, right? First thing, line 124 is proceeds of capital asset sales. So a capital asset sale is when you are selling real property. You're selling vehicles, land or buildings, or heavy equipment. That's proceeds of capital asset sales would be those items. So if I have a fleet vehicle, like an old police car that I sold, and we got proceeds from that, I put it here. If I have an old building, we moved into a new city hall, we sold the old city hall and the land that it was on, that goes in here under proceeds of capital asset sale. So this is big sale items. Proceeds of long-term debt is borrowed money. So this is where you would put borrowed money where you have a multiple year repayment schedule. So if I borrow money from a bank or from an investment firm who's going to sell to investors, the amount that I borrowed that they gave me, so the amount of proceeds from the sale of that debt go here, or the amount of the loan that the bank gave me goes here. Also going here would be SRF money from the state. So if you have a loan through the SRF fund or through the USDA, so if you got a loan, and this is loans, repayable money through the USDA, that would also go here. Those are the kinds of items that end up on long-term debt. So that's if it's multiple years of repayment. If it's money that's going to be repaid within the next year, or it's like a planning and design loan through the SRF where you're not going to repay this money, you're getting it on a short term and then another loan is going to pay it off and you'll pay that loan, that's called short-term debt or proceeds of anticipatory warrants sometimes. But short-term debt where the entire repayment schedule is a year or less, or it's never going to be repaid, it'll be subsumed into a bigger loan through the USDA. So like a USDA construction loan or a state revolving fund planning and design loan, those would go here. Okay. Right below it, we have two lines, 127 and 128, and these are for transfers. So line 127 is for non-TIF fund related transfers in. So if I'm bringing money into my fund that's coming from another fund in the city, then I would put it on line 127, as long as it's not coming from or going through to the TIF fund. So if it's money that's coming from or going to the TIF fund, I put it on line 128. If it's money that's coming from or going to a non-TIF fund, I put it on line 127. Every transfer in has to have a matching transfer out. So bear that in mind, okay? So if I have a number, so if I have, $100,000 on line 127 under the general fund, on expenditures page 9, where I have my transfers out, right here, line 132, I've got to have a matching amount that shows $100,000 coming from this fund. And then on line revenue page 5, I show it going into a separate fund. They have to balance. That'll be the error you see the most when you do your check errors, is that you have money coming into one fund, but you don't have any money coming out of another fund to match it. Okay, so make sure you're always balancing your transfers. All right, line 134 is the most missed line on the entire AFR. So now there's an error that will tell you when you're missing it. So line 134 is where you put your beginning fund balance. So this is the balance as of the end of the prior fiscal year. So July 1 at midnight, how much money did I have in each of these funds? How much cash was I carrying in each of these funds on my accounting ledger? This is not money in the bank. This is amount of money on paper. Because like I said, your amount of money in the bank at that time could differ from the amount of money you have in your general ledger. So we want your general ledger balances here by fund. You put it across. Do not just throw all of it into the general fund. Make sure you're keeping track of it by fund where it is earned or spent. Okay, so that has to go in here. Otherwise, you will get an error message telling you you have not put in your year's beginning fund balance. And if you put in zeros here, when you get to the end, your ending fund balance will never tie out to what you have on your books. So make sure that you address that. Okay, before we go into expenditures, any questions on revenues, Grace?
Yes, there is a question. Where would I record restitution from the county clerk?
Oh, so yeah, so if you're getting court restitution, that would actually go under contributions or fines under miscellaneous.
And then we do have one more question from earlier, asking if WTFAP grants from the IFA go under state grants.
Yes, those would be, so if it's IFA money, it would be under state. Yep. That's correct. That would be on revenues page 3. We would put that on, probably I would put it on either state grants line 44 or give it its own line on line 55. But state grants is probably the best place to put it. So line 44.
All right, we're all caught up on questions then. Thanks, Ted.
Okay, so let's pop over to expenditures. So expenditures, let me get back to the slides. Okay, so your expenditures are a little bit more cut and dry than revenues, because revenues can go, sometimes it can go on multiple different lines. Expenditures really only ever go on the line of the program that the expenditure was made for, right? So we have 7 different expenditure programs, or sorry, I think it's 9 different expenditure programs. Public safety, public works, health and social services, culture and rec, community and economic development, general government, debt service, capital projects, business type enterprise activities. Those are our expenditure programs under which you can legally spend money in the state of Iowa as a city. So the expenditure programs are pretty self-explanatory. So public safety is anything that happens that is for protecting the public, whether it's protecting their safety physically through the police or protecting them from harm through fire prevention or ambulance service. It could be jailing, it could be emergency management, anything where there's a protection element involved is public safety. Okay? Public works is your building programs. So if you are doing street improvement, if you are building a new building in the, or maintaining a building of the city that the city owns, that would be public works. Garbage could go under public works if you are contracting your garbage hauling. So if I contract my waste disposal, my solid waste disposal, so a private hauler picks up the garbage and takes it to a disposal site that I do not own, like a county landfill, then I put it under general fund and I put the expenditures under public works. If I own the trucks or my city does the pickup, so I have city staff who actually comes and picks up the garbage and takes it to a landfill, then that goes under proprietary fund and the expense goes under business type enterprise activities. So just bear that in mind, garbage can go both ways. But that's public works is mostly gonna be road use and road maintenance. That's the number one thing under public works, but it could also be building maintenance of public buildings, things like that. Health and social services, most of you smaller cities will not have to deal with, right? Major cities have to deal with health and social services because if you're 50,000 or above in population, the federal government puts requirements on you to do some health and social service programs, okay? You may have to do some sort of indigent outreach or refugee outreach, or you may have to provide some senior support like congregate meals or Meals on Wheels, things like that. For smaller cities, the only thing that you might have under health and social services would be like if you have a mosquito spraying program, which a lot of towns in Iowa do, a lot of cities in Iowa do that. That would go under health and social services. If you do a congregate meal or Meals on Wheels, that also goes under health and social services. Or if you have a bunch of senior programs where you're providing assistance to seniors, that would go under health and social services as well. Culture and recreation is broad. Culture and recreation is the basic things that you think of when you think of culture and rec: parks, trails, your sports programs. If you have a little league program that the city runs, or you have swimming programs that the city runs, a pool, a water park, your sports complexes, that all goes under culture and recreation. But also under culture and recreation is your community center. So if you have a community center that you run, that goes under there. If you have a cemetery that the city's in charge of upkeep, those costs go under culture and recreation. There's a specific line for it. So make sure that you are paying attention to those lines inside the forms. And we do have dedicated lines I'll show you in a minute for each of those types of programs. But culture and rec is wider than you think. Don't just think of it as parks and sports. Community and economic development is a hard one to pin down. There are items that you do for beautification of your city or for improvement of your city that don't really fit anywhere else. That's when you put them under community and economic development. If it is something, if you're doing a project that is specifically aimed at providing economic development opportunities or increasing the city's property tax base, property value base, then that goes in under community and economic development. The main things that you would put here would be, like if you're making right-of-way improvements, that's a big one. If you're taking down, the thing that has gone in here that I've gotten the most questions about over the last few years was if you had ash tree removal. So the Emerald ash borer came into Iowa and a lot of ash trees had to be removed. That could go under community beautification here or other. Your planning and zoning committee, any cost of planning and zoning committee or planning and zoning activities go under here. And then TIF rebates are the big ones, TIF agreement payments that you make. So if you're making a payment of TIF dollars over to a private developer or a citizen, that goes under community and economic development. General government is a catch-all. So that's where, if it doesn't go anywhere else, you can put it under general government, basically. But this general government is meant to be the costs associated with administering the city. Okay? So here's where the council costs go, the mayor's costs, your city manager's costs, your city clerk's costs, costs for legal services, costs for run elections, costs for tort liability insurance for the city. Although tort liability, you'll generally break down into what is general tort liability of the city and what is specific to each department. And you'll put the departmental costs under their department line. You'll put your general government costs under the general government section. And the same thing will happen there with wages. Wages for like your city staff, like your finance director, your city clerk, or your city manager may be broken out between departments. So you may have part of their wages under police, part of their wages under culture and rec, part of it under public works, and then part of it under general government. That would not be odd at all. So make sure, and that would be best actually, is to break out the wages by where they're earned into those cost centers. But you can put all of your main administrative, your general administrative staff wages under general government. The other big item that goes under general government is your cost of city hall maintenance or your general buildings, just the general upkeep, utility costs, the cost the cost to buy commodities for, your office supplies, things like that will go under general government. And then any of your memberships, if they're not specific to a particular department, like your league dues, we'll give the league some mention here. So your league dues would go under general government. Debt service is only the money that is being spent to repay debt that you already have. So if I'm repaying a debt that I took out, I put it on the debt service line. If I brought in loan proceeds that I am now spending on a project, so I'm taking the borrowed money and I'm spending it, that is not debt service. That is either a capital project or it is a expenditure of a specific department, but it does not go under the debt service line. The debt service line is specifically payments going back out to repay debt. General obligation debt, which is debt that is funded by property tax, has to be paid out of the debt service line under the debt service fund column. Okay, so if it is a general obligation of the city, regardless of where I'm getting that money to repay it, because you don't always use property tax to repay a GO loan. A lot of times you'll use other various sources like TIF or water sewer revenue or local option sales tax or road use funds. So if I'm bringing in those other revenue sources to pay my general obligation debt, I have to take them from their various funds, transfer them to the debt service fund, and then show the payment coming out of debt service on my AFR. Because there is an error message built into the system that will tell you, you showed that you have this much, paid out of this much GO debt. You need to show that much payment coming out of your general obligation or out of your debt service fund to pay the general obligation. Because by law, GO debts have to be paid out of the debt service fund on the debt service line. Okay. All right. Capital projects is any high dollar, non-reoccurring project can be considered a capital project. So if I'm building a road and I'm only going to build that road once, that would be a capital project. If I'm building a new building in the city, that would be a capital project. So this is short duration, only done over a year or two, high dollars. So the general rule of thumb has always been 25 grand or more. That's arbitrary. You can use eye of the beholder to say what's a capital project to you. But the main thing is it's non-reoccurring, meaning it's not going to happen every year. It's a rare expense, right? It's building a road or resurfacing a road or building a building or renovating a building. It's things like that are capital projects. Business type enterprise activities are anything where you are using self-supporting dollars to pay the cost. So this is all of your utilities, water, sewer, gas, electric, telecom if the city owns a telecom, garbage if the city owns the garbage trucks or pays the workers. So it's fee-based expenditures of fee-based systems. That goes under business type enterprise. And then again, transfers out match the transfers in. So this is if I'm moving money out of one fund of the city to move it into a separate fund of the city, that is a transfer out. And again, two separate lines for transfers out, just like there were for transfers in. So transfers coming from or going to the TIF fund go on the internal TIF loan repayments transfer line. Anything not TIF related, where I'm moving money from one fund to another, goes on the regular transfers out line, and it always has to be balanced by a transfer in. Right. At the bottom of expenditures, page 9, there is a set of lines for your expenditure or for your ending balances, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I want to show you a little bit about the expenditures pages. So expenditures page 6, you have public safety, public works, health and social services, and culture and recreation. And you can see under each program, under each expenditure program, we give you individualized lines to break it out by function, what was being done. Okay, so just put it on the right line, but more importantly, the most important thing is get it in the right program and under the right column, for where that money came from. All right. Remember, there's expenditures page 6, expenditures page 7, okay, and that's where general government is, that's where debt service is, that's where capital projects are. And then there's page 8. Page 8 is going to be all of your proprietary functionality, your fee-based system expenditures, where you're bringing in a fee to support the function of the system. Expenditures page 9 is going to be your transfers, but then at the bottom, we calculate on line 147 down here, we calculate the amount of dollars that you have an ending cash balance, an ending fund balance, I should say. So the system calculates line 147 by taking the beginning balance you entered on revenues page 5, plus all of the revenues that you entered on revenues page 2 through page 5, and then subtracting from that right here, line 136, which is all of your expenditures that you entered on the expense pages. All of that comes to line 147, which is your calculated ending balance. When you get to the point where you've entered all of your beginning balance, your revenues and your expenditures, come to line 147 and make sure that this ties out to your ending fund balance of your general ledger, okay? Make sure that that ties out perfectly. If it doesn't, you need to make changes in other areas. Do that before you address line 140 through 144, because these lines are a breakout of line 147. Okay, GASB Statement 54, GASB, G-A-S-B, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, their Statement 54 requires local governments, cities in particular, and counties, to break out their ending fund balance in accordance to how it's designated. How protected is that cash balance at the end of the year? Lines 140 through 144 allow you to do that. But you don't want to address this until your line 147 ending balance by fund ties out to what you have on paper in your general ledger. Okay, once that's square, then you can come to 147, or to 140 through 144. Because lines 140 through 144, what we want you to do by fund is take the amount on line 147. So in this instance, I have 250,000 in ending balance on my line 147. And I want to take that 250,000 and say how much of it is non-spendable, how much of it is restricted, how much of it is committed, how much of it is assigned, and how much of it is unassigned. Okay? So part of this balance will go into each of these categories, or could go in. It won't necessarily, but it could go into each of these categories. Okay? So let's take a little bit of a closer look at what the categories mean. Non-spendable money, line 140, is an amount that is legally or contractually required to be held. You can't spend it. So this would be if you got what's called a perpetual care fund. So if a citizen died and as part of their will, they left the city an amount of money, and specifically in the will it said, okay, city, you have to hold on to this money I'm giving you, but any money that you gain on that in interest or investment income, you can then spend towards a specific purpose, right? That's called a perpetual care. You'll see them a lot of times with libraries, cemeteries, or parks. You don't see them very much anywhere else. Libraries get them the most. So that money becomes non-spendable because those dollars that were given to the city, I cannot legally spend until the bequest says I can. And that may be never. Sometimes you have to hold them into perpetuity and you can only ever spend the interest, never the principal. That's non-spendable cash. Restricted cash is anything where you legally or contractually can only spend the money a certain way. So this is things like road use tax money, local option sales tax dollars, your debt service money that comes in, so your debt service property taxes, your employee benefits property taxes, your insurance, your property casualty and tort liability insurance property tax, all of those are restricted, along with money that I've borrowed that I'm going to spend towards a project. So if I borrowed debt proceeds, excuse me, and I'm going to spend it towards a project, but I haven't done that yet, that's restricted cash. Because legally I can only spend it for the projects that I had on, that I was borrowing for. Those things where I'm legally constrained or I'm contractually constrained from spending it any other way, that's restricted cash. Committed is where the city council has committed that money towards a project or a purpose by ordinance or resolution, an actual voted action that was put into paper, right? Resolution, ordinance. Assigned is something where the council has obligated that money, or a subgroup of the council has obligated that money by an action that's a motion vote, right? So if I say, okay, I want to give the park $100,000 for this, for playground equipment replacement, and they take a motion vote of the council, and the council designates that money for the replacement, that would be assigned because it was just a motion vote. It was not put into writing under an ordinance or a resolution. That's the difference between those two. Unassigned is everything else, where the money has not been given a specific purpose yet. So a lot of the general fund property tax dollars that you bring in each year will be unassigned until you have a purpose for them. Also negative balances. So if I come to the end of the year and I have a negative ending fund balance in my fund, so my debt service fund is negative $1,000 because I overspent it, that would be considered an unassigned. Whereas if I had a positive cash balance in my debt service fund, that would be considered restricted because the only thing I can do with it is repay debt service. So you have to kind of gauge where to put these based on the usage. Proprietary does its own thing. It's in its own category. There is a category for just proprietary dollars. The ending balance, you don't have to do anything with that. But for every fund, from general through permanent, you have to state out of that line 147 balance. So again, we're looking just at line 147 and we're saying, okay, out of this cash balance of 250, how much of it goes into unassigned? We'll say 100,000 of it is unassigned. We've committed 50,000 of it. And then restricted for certain purposes is another 100,000, okay? So you can see line 145, which is a total of lines 140 through 144, it says 250,000. That matches line 147. That's ultimately what I want to do because I'm saying out of this 250,000, 100 of it is unassigned, 50 of it's committed, 100,000 is restricted, okay? This is a negative balance under special revenue, so I have to put my negative balance as unassigned, okay? And then any other balances that I would have, I'd have to break out the same way. But now you can see line 145 matches line 147 by fund. That's where I need to be at the end of this process. Okay, any questions about expenditures before we move into our other P10 and city debt detail? Okay. All right. So, other P10 and the city debt detail, these pages do not factor into your revenues or expenditures or ending balance calculation of your AFR. What we're using on other P10 is we're collecting a subset of the data that we put in on revenues page 2 through expenditures page 9. So we're going to say, yes, you reported over here these expenditures and revenues. We want a little bit more detail about what you entered there. The first thing we want to see is part 3 up at the top of your revenues, or of your other P10, excuse me. Part 3 is intergovernmental money that you are spending. So the city spent money for police protection, in an example, police protection during fiscal year 24 or 25, which we're about to report, fiscal year 25. How much of that police protection money went to another local government, okay? So if I pay a sheriff's contract and the sheriff does my police protection for me, I would show that contract on expenditures page 6 as an expenditure towards police protection. But then I would also come here to other P10, part 3, and I would say, out of my police protection line, this much money went to a contract with another local government. You'll also show that under corrections a lot of times, because if you use the county jail for your prisoners or another larger city's jail for any prisoners that you take, that your police force takes in a smaller town, that goes to correction for another local government. A lot of times it'll be library money, police protection, or sanitation that you will show as money paid to another local government. But this is basically cash that you paid to another local government for a service that they provided. That's what we're looking for on the left side of part 3 at the top of other P10, okay? On the right side, there's 2 lines, and it's money that I gave to the state for something that the state provided me. In this case, it's probably going to be roads, highway. So if the state is resurfacing a highway that runs through your city, they'll often say, hey, city, we're also willing to do your portion of that highway if you pay us a portion. You know, if you do some cost sharing with us, we will pave this in-town section as well, not just the out-of-town section. So you may have a cost share that you pay to the Iowa DOT, that goes on highways line, because you're reimbursing them for the cost of them doing a project for you. That's the most common thing that you'll see on here. There's some other things that you may pay to the state. Just a couple of years ago, we had a bunch of the ability for you to purchase on a state contract for IT solutions, for equipment, essentially computers and IT equipment. That would go on here under all other, because that was money you paid to the state because they bought they use their contract to buy you IT equipment at a cheaper rate. That happens every now and then. It happened during the ARPA funds. We had some money go to a program like that. So that would be payments to the state. Some of you got that for free. Some of you had to pay a little bit. So that's the kind of thing that goes on the top. Part 3 of other P10 is money paid to other governments for services. Part 4 is required. So every city pays wages to employees. Every city has employees who get paid for the job they do. So on part 4, in the middle of other P10, we want you to enter the amount of wages paid to all employees of the city. That's full-time, part-time, and seasonal. All wages paid to employees of the city before deductions. So gross wages. Wages before you deducted anything out. That's what we want reported here, the total. Give us the total, okay? Down on part 5 is the long-term debt matrix. So this is a reporting of the debt that is outstanding during the fiscal year and was paid during the fiscal year for the city. It used to be filled in on other P10. Now it's going to flow through from the new city debt detail page. So this is all going to be white and it will fill in from what you enter on the city debt detail page. Okay, so on the other P10, you get to skip it until you fill out your city debt detail. Right below that is part of part 5, the B of part 5. So long-term debt is part A, short-term debt is part B. Remember, short-term debt is debt that it has a payment schedule of a year or less, meaning that the entire payment schedule is a year or less, not that you're in the last year of a 20-year repayment. But if it has a 1-year repayment schedule, or it's money that's short-term that's never going to be repaid, it's going to be rolled into a larger loan, those dollars you still have to report here on part B of part 5 of other P10. Okay, so just make sure that you're reporting the amount of principal and only principal, not interest, only principal at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year in total. That's what we want to see for short-term debt. Other P10 part 7 is, so part 6 is a calculation of your, of the city's general obligation limit. So how much money you can borrow under a general obligation. That's part 6. Part 7 is, and that's automatically done by the form, you don't have to do anything for that. Part 7 is where you enter your bank balances. So this is cash and investment assets as of the end of the fiscal year. So this will be for this one you're doing now, June 30, 2025. So this is where we want you to enter your bank balances. So how much money did you have how much money did you have in each of your bank accounts, checking, savings, money market, and your investment accounts, CDs, or other allowed investments at the end of the fiscal year. So June 30, how much was left, okay? If you are an accrual basis city, this is not gonna match your line 147 total. Your expense page 9, line 147, ending balance, they will not match, and that's okay. If you're a cash basis city, this will match unless you have outstanding checks that have not been cashed. So at June 30, if you had written a check earlier in June and the party who received the check had not yet cashed it, your balance here will be higher than line 147, and that's just fine. This balance of cash in the bank and investment should never be lower than line 147 if you are a cash basis city. Keep that in mind, okay? So you have to enter it by your, by how you're holding the money or what the money is being held for, okay? So you have 4 categories there. Most of you will only use all other funds. So if you are using one of the other items, it's because you're holding money for a very specific reason, okay? The reasons are outlined here. But most of you will put your entire bank balance under all other funds. If you're holding money for the redemption of a long-term debt, so if you did what's called a crossover refunding, where you paid off an old debt with a new debt, but you have to make 1 more year of payments before that new debt pays the old debt, if you have that money in escrow, that goes under bond and interest funds, okay? Most of you will never face that or rarely face that. Bond construction funds is if you borrowed money from a debt that you have not yet spent on the project that it was borrowed for. If you're holding that cash, that goes under bond construction funds. Pension retirement funds, if you have a reserve account to fund your pension or retirement expenditures that you have for retired employees, that would go under here. So if you are if you are giving your police captain or your fire captain, if you're giving them deferred compensation, which is allowed under Iowa law for the captains of those programs, or for a city manager, if you're doing a deferred compensation program and you're holding some of that deferred compensation funds, that would go under pension retirement funds here, if that's part of your ending balance, right? Otherwise, everything else goes under all other funds. If you are unsure, put it under all other funds and call it a day. Do not struggle with this for too long, okay? If you are a city smaller than 10,000, you're probably gonna be all other funds. Right, that's kind of the cutoff. All right, now let's talk about city debt detail. This is a brand new page, so those of you who have done an AFR before, you will have never done this page before. You can see here, it looks a lot like the long-term debt page of the budget. If you have been in your position long enough that you did the FY26 budget this last spring, then this should look relatively familiar to you because it'll look very similar to the long-term debt page of the budget. And a lot of the information that you're going to enter will be similar to what you put in the long-term debt page of the budget. But remember, we are reporting for the year that just ended here. We're not reporting for the current year and we're not reporting for next year. We're reporting for the year that just ended, fiscal year 25. What were my balances outstanding? What was my amount of payment that I made during the year? That's the kind of information that we're collecting here. Okay, we have a couple of other bits of information that have never been reported anywhere before at the state level that you're gonna have to grapple with, but we'll go through these kind of one by one. All right, so the first column on the left that we require you to enter information into is debt series name. The debt series name, just like it is the debt name on the budget, is we want you to enter there a unique identifying name for the debt so that we can keep that debt separate from every other debt. I would strongly suggest you use the same kind of naming conventions that we use for the budget, which is the year that the debt was issued, the repayment source that's going to repay the debt, and then the authorization source. So if you have a general obligation, mark it GO, even if you're not going to pay it from taxes, you still mark that as GO. And then what was it used for? Just a brief statement. So for instance, if I had a street loan that I took out that I'm repaying from the general, or I took it out as a general obligation in 2018, I would call it 2018 GO streets. Boom, there we go. The next thing we need you to select is the type of debt that it is. Okay, is this a TIF agreement, a TIF revenue debt, a general obligation debt, a revenue debt, or an other type of debt? Those are your options because that's a drop down that you're going to have. And let me pop over so you can see this in the system. So if I go to city debt detail, you can see right here, type of debt, you get a drop down, you get options. You're not going to type this in, you're going to select one of the options, okay? So if I have a GO debt is a debt that has been approved for repayment from property tax sources, right? So if I can use my debt service levy to repay the debt, regardless of if I'm actually using my debt service levy. So if I sold it or issued it as a GO, I have to mark this as a GO, general obligation, meaning I can use my property taxes to repay it. If it is a TIF agreement, so TIF rebate, a developer agreement, an economic development agreement, then I have to mark it as TIF agreements. Yes, this year, for AFR only, we have to have you report TIF agreements also. But we want you to aggregate your TIF agreements onto one line. Do not list every separate TIF agreement, because if you are a large city, like the city of Cedar Rapids or the city of Des Moines, they have so many TIF agreements that I would not have enough lines for them. They'd be into the hundreds of lines that they would have to put in. So I want you to add up all of your TIF rebates and rebate type agreements, developer agreements, economic development agreements, forgivable loans that are going to be repaid from TIF or paid from TIF. Those go onto the one line and we mark them as a TIF agreement, okay? So if it's a rebate type agreement, a negotiated contract with the counterparty, we mark it as TIF agreement. TIF revenue is if it's a structured debt that I'm going to repay with TIF. So if I issued a debt that was a TIF revenue debt or a TIF revenue loan, TIF revenue bond, that goes in as TIF revenue, okay? That's the difference between TIF agreement and TIF revenue. TIF agreement is when you have an agreement with a single counterparty, like a rebate or a developer agreement, that goes on that line. TIF revenue is if I have a structured debt owed to a bank or an investment firm. Revenue is when it's a revenue loan, like a water utility revenue debt or sewer utility revenue debt. So this is going to be your SRF loans, your USDA loans, and then any other fee-backed revenue debt that you issue, where the only thing you can use to repay it is the fees of the system. Because this could also mean like road use tax fee or local option sales tax loans. Those would be revenue debts as well. Other is going to be very few and far between, but other could be the main type of other would be like a general fund loan. So if your fire, the best example of this is if your fire department is buying a new fire truck, you can sell that as a general fund loan, and then your fire department will use part of their budget or money from the township fires or money that's donated to pay for that loan. That would be an other, because it just obligates your general fund, not your general obligation. Okay, that's about the best example of other that I can come up with, because other doesn't happen that often. But you have to select one of those debt types and enter it in here, just to show us basically where to put it in the matrix on other P10. Okay, the next column is date of issuance, and the date of issuance we want you to put in is what was the date that this debt was ultimately approved by resolution. Okay, so my 2014 GO street bond that I put in here as an example, I have an issuance date of 9/1/2014, because all the way back in 2014 is when I originally approved this debt by resolution. Then in the next column, debt resolution, I put in the resolution number that originally approved the sale of the debt or the issuance of the debt way back in 2014. So these two should not change from year to year. So if I put it in this year, I should then put the same thing in next year, because the date of issuance and the issuing resolution number should never change unless you redo the debt. Okay? So for individual debts, you just put in the date it was originally approved, and then the resolution number of the resolution that approved it. All debts have to be approved by a resolution of the council after a hearing, at minimum. Some of them require more, but at minimum, that's what has to be done to have a debt. Again, TIF rebates and TIF agreements are going to be a little bit different. What we want you to put in, since we're having you aggregate all of those onto one line or add them all together and put them on one line, the date of issuance will always be the last year of the fiscal year being reported. So in this case, 6/30 of 2025. The debt resolution number, put in TIF rebate or TIF agreement or something like that. That just says, these are my TIF agreements added together. Okay? The next column is rate range. So here we want you to put in so over the life of your loan, so if I have a bond that's a 20-year GO bond, like this 2014 street GO bond, out of all 20 years of payments, what is the least amount of interest rate that I'm going to be charged, and what is the most amount of interest rate that I'm going to be charged under the agreement? So we want you to go back and look at your interest rates charged by year and tell us what's the high and what's the low. Okay, and then you just put that in as a range. So in this case, on this debt, I was charged a low of 1.25% and a high of 5%. You're going to have some agreements like your SRF loans where it's going to be a flat rate all the way across, or some of your bank debts where it'll be a flat interest rate all the way across. Then you just put in the same 3.0 to 3.0, 3.25 to 3.25. Okay, so make sure that you're just putting in a range there. And on TIF rebate agreements, it's always going to be zero unless you are being charged an interest rate as part of your agreement, which is fairly rare in a negotiated TIF agreement, but it does sometimes happen. The voted column, we want to see how was this debt approved? Okay, was the debt forced to go to a vote of the people? Because sometimes you do have to go to a vote of the people to approve the debt, or was it a debt that didn't have to be voted on? Okay, so your options here again come in a drop down. So your options are voted, non-voted because it was, or no vote because it was essential GO, no vote because it was below the corporate general obligation threshold, or a no vote because it's not a GO debt. So we've got 3 that belong to GO debts and 1 that it means it was not a GO debt. So we'll start with the bottom. No vote non-GO means that this is not a general obligation debt, so it did not have to go to a vote of the people under any circumstance. Boom, that's no vote non-GO. Okay, so all of your revenue debts are going to be no vote non-GO. All of your TIF agreement debts are going to be no vote non-GO. TIF revenue debts can be, that could be no vote below threshold, or it could be no vote non-GO. It just depends on how it's structured. Okay, so that's going to be no vote non-GO. Voted or no vote essential geo, we'll go to no vote essential geo. So the no vote essential geo means that this was an essential corporate purpose of the city. So when you issue a general obligation debt, there are two types of general obligation debts you can issue. Number one is it is a essential corporate purpose of the city, meaning that it is so integral to running a city or to maintaining a city that we're not going to ever put it to a vote of the people. It's strictly under the purview of the city council. They can issue this debt as they see fit. So this is basically horizontal improvements. So we're talking about roads, we're talking about infrastructure upgrades for sewer, water, that sort of thing. Basically the horizontal infrastructure of a city, but it also is public safety related items can also be in there, which is like equipping your public safety functions. Those types of things. 384.24 of the Code of Iowa gives you a list. So under one of the subsections, there's a list of what's essential corporate purpose, and there's a list of what's the other type, which is general corporate purpose. But essential corporate purpose, if it fits into that type of agreement, then that doesn't go to a vote of the citizens unless there's a reverse referendum. So the issuances that you had that were essential corporate purpose, you'd put in as no vote, essential geo, okay? If it was a corporate purpose voted, so a general corporate purpose, which are ones that can go to a vote under certain circumstances, you would put in here that it was either not voted on because it was below a threshold, and we'll talk about the thresholds in a second, or you would put in that it was general corporate purpose and we did have to have a vote on it. So if it went to a vote of the people before you could issue the debt, you'd put in voted. If it was general corporate purpose, but it didn't have to go to a vote because we were below a threshold, and you can find your thresholds at DOM, yes, get out of here, got it. So I can go to dom.iowa.gov, and then if I go to local government, city resources, okay, wait a second while it takes my click. If it's going to, there we go. And then I scroll down, right away. The very top item here says updated general purpose debt vote thresholds. I'm gonna click on that. Okay, so right here, every January, you can see this was issued January 2nd, 2025. Now, under the Code of Iowa, every January, the Department of Management will issue for cities the new general purpose thresholds. So if you're issuing a general corporate purpose debt, there is an amount of debt based on your city's population that you can go up to. You can issue debt up to this amount in principle before you have to take it to a vote. So let's say I'm building or I'm refurbishing my city hall, which is a general corporate purpose, or I'm building or refurbishing a swimming pool, another general corporate purpose. Those items could have to go to a vote of your citizens. You'll see it all the time with pools. You see pools are often going to a referendum. That's because to build a pool, it costs millions of dollars. And that's a general corporate purpose, not an essential corporate purpose, so it has to be voted on by the people if you go over this threshold. So here's the 2025 threshold. If I'm 5,000 or less in population, as of 2025 or as of the last official census, then I can issue 534,040 in principal general corporate purpose debt before I have to take it to a vote of the people. So if my debt that I'm issuing is going to be $400,000, I don't have to take it to a vote of the people. I can issue it with just the council acting. If I'm 5,000 to 75,000, above 5,000 to 75,000, then I can do $934,000. If I'm over 75,000, I can issue 1.3 million before I have to take it to a vote of the people. These get adjusted every January, so pay attention to that. But that tells you what your vote threshold is. So if I'm issuing and I'm below that threshold, so I didn't have to vote on it, it's a general corporate purpose, but it was below the threshold, I would click no vote below threshold, okay? That has to legally be collected by law now. So make sure that you're tracking that each time you issue a new debt. You may have to go back to the resolution of your previous debts will probably tell you what type of debt it is, because usually if it's an essential corporate purpose debt, it will say that in the title or right in the first couple of paragraphs on the resolution. If it is a general, it'll do the same thing, and then it will also state the vote was held on this date and was approved, or no vote was needed because it was below the threshold of whatever. And it'll state that right in there. So go back to if you're unsure, go back to your resolutions. They will be your guiding light. The amount of issue column, we want you to put in the amount that was originally issued in principal, okay? For non-TIF agreements, this is very simple. So you just go back to the original debt, it'll have what's called a par amount on there, or an amount of issuance, you just put that in, and that'll never change, okay? So in 2014, I got 12.5 million for this second debt down. So I put in 12.5 million every single year I reported on here until it's done, okay? The amount of issue for TIF agreements, we want you to add together the not to exceed amount that was in the TIF agreement. So if you have like a TIF rebate agreement, it will have a not to exceed amount and an amount that they get per year. So it might say that we will give this city in this rebate agreement, a rebate of 80% of their increment taxes up to an amount not to exceed $150,000. So the amount that I would put in here would be $150,000 added into all the other not to exceeds of the other agreements that I'm adding together, okay? The principal outstanding is the amount of principal still owed on that debt coming into this fiscal year, coming into the fiscal year 25 that I'm currently reporting. So on July 1 of 2024, how much principal still yet remained to be paid, okay? So for instance, I started out this debt owing $12.5 million of principal repayment. I'm down to just $125,000 left that I have to pay this year, okay? The next column, fiscal year principal paid, and the column after that, fiscal year interest paid, is okay, during the fiscal year I'm currently reporting, so fiscal year 25, what was the principal that I paid to them under this column? What was the interest that I paid to this debt under this column? Okay, so that's only for this reported fiscal year. All right, tied to other debt is a difficult thing to understand. So I'm going to do my best, but this is something that they want to know. The legislators want to know, it was put into law. So tied to debt, it wants to know basically, if I entered a debt on here that borrowed money for a specific project that we then borrowed more money for that same project, I want you to show those as tied together. So for instance here, we have a 2018 water SRF, and this 2018 water SRF was used to replace water mains, okay? We found out in 2020 that we needed more money to finish that water main replacement project, so I took out another debt, okay, 5 million more. These two are tied together because they went to the same project, the exact same project, okay? They both were replacing water mains, they were both just issued at different times for the replacement of water mains. So I would show that the line 3 debt is tied to the debt on line 4, the line 4 debt is tied to the debt on line 3. These two are two debts that were issued for the same purpose. Okay, that's all that this means, tied to other debt. Most of the time you will issue a debt and it will not be tied to any other debt that was issued, you would just leave it blank. Okay, but if you had two debts that were issued for the same purpose, the same project, you would show those as tied together. Okay, purpose of debt. We want to know, what was the debt mainly used for? And this is to put it into the right line of other P10, that debt matrix. So if my water SRF was used for water, I would mark it as a water utility. If it was a general obligation debt that was used for multiple purposes, which is the case in most general obligation debts, I mark it as general obligation. TIF agreements, I mark as TIF revenue. Okay, so you basically just state what was the main purpose of that debt, and you put it there. Anything that's GO, just mark it as GO prop. And then under the last projects funded by debt, the last thing on the right, you have to type in, what was the money that you borrowed with this debt? What was it spent on? Okay, you have a 150 character limit here. Punctuation and spaces count as a character. So you don't have a lot of room, so you want to be pretty concise, all right? So here's a good example. The 2014 street bond I used to do street and sidewalk improvements on Main Street. So I put in street and sidewalk improvements dash Main Street. I got as specific as I could in 150 characters. Water main replacement's pretty specific, especially if I'm doing it citywide, right? Renovation of City Hall, pretty specific. That one's pretty easy. This one, swimming pool improvements. Improvements to changing area and the maintenance facility at the city swimming pool. That I can get super specific if it's, if I've got 150 characters, I can get pretty specific. So get as specific as you can in 150 characters. If I'm going to exceed the 150 characters, come on, let me in. There we go. All right. If I'm going to exceed the 150 characters, it will warn me when I get there. Apparently got a lot more than I thought. So let me copy this and then do it again as an example. So if I copy, I come down, I put in a space, and I paste it, boom. Now I'm over 150 characters. So it's telling me, hey, shorten it up. You're too long. So then I know, oh, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that I was too long here. Let me go in and take it out, and I'll put in a much shorter statement. There we go. Doesn't flash red, I know I'm good. So you don't have to go through and individually count characters. You can put in characters until it hits that, it flashes red and says, hey, you're over limit. But you have to put that in for each project. Okay? This has to be readable and understandable by a citizen or by a legislator. Okay? So make sure that you're doing that correctly and filling it out. And then again, all of this information will then flow back to the long-term debt matrix on other P10. Okay? So all of this will fill out from there. They will also flow through to the all funds P1 summary at the bottom. That will flow through from other P10 as it has in past years. Nothing changing there. Okay? Okay, let's talk about finishing out your reporting. So once you get all of that filled in, there's one other place on the all funds P1 page that you have to deal with before you can be, or you may have to deal with before you can be done. Okay, you can see there are some blue spots on the all funds P1 page that are auto-filled for you. You can change them, don't change them. So if it is a spot like on the top, unless you had an address change, if your city changed address, please correct that for me so that I have it for the next year. But the budget column, column D on the right-hand side, it has blue spaces to correct the budget. You will not have to correct the budget because we pull that from the budget system automatically. So you do not need to change those. If you need to change those, talk to me and I'll help you with that because we'll have to change it through other means. But everything else fills in from other pages of the AFR where you enter data. The only thing that doesn't is the non-budgeted balance. So beneath your financial statement there that shows all of your revenues, expenditures, and balances, there's a second place where you can put in non-budgeted balances. Sometimes cities have part of their ending balance that they're holding for someone else, or they're holding for a reason that doesn't get budgeted every year, okay? So there's 4 types of ways you could be holding money. Some of them are self-explanatory, like internal service funds. These are dollars that I'm holding in trust as basically depreciation against future charges, and I'm not budgeting that money right now. I'm holding it in a depreciation fund, and I'm separating it out. If you're not GAAP, you don't need to worry about that. A pension trust fund, so that deferred compensation that I was talking about earlier, if I'm holding that for future use and I don't budget it year to year, I can put it in here as a non-budgeted and leave it out of my cash balances on page 5 and page 9. Private purpose trust funds and agency funds are the 2 that you're going to use most likely. So if part of your bank balance that you're holding is because you're holding money for another group, a local group who wanted to use the city as their fiscal agent so that they didn't have to get their own separate bank account. Like you have a 501c3 that's doing a purpose that's great for the city, and they didn't want to get their own bank account and write their own check. So they said, hey, city, will you please act as our fiscal agent? You can hold our cash, you can write our checks, and then you just don't have to budget those items because that's not city activity. You don't have to budget it as part of your budget. You don't have to record it as part of your AFR. You'd have to show that their balance, part of your cash balance on other P10 is because of this private purpose trust funds that you're holding for someone else. There's also agency funds. So that's if you have like your Chamber of Commerce, you're holding their cash, or you have a housing authority that's not part of the city, that's a 501c3, and you're holding their cash. That would be agency funds. Those don't get budgeted under the budget, and they don't get reported under the AFR revenues and expenditures and balances because it's not the city's money. But it will be part of your other P10 cash balance. And this is a way for you to show us that, yes, I know my other P10 cash balance was way above what I showed on expenditures page 9 as far as cash balance in my funds. Here's why, okay? Most of the time, you're not going to enter these. For most cities, you will never deal with these, but you can deal with those there if you have to. Like I said, the indebtedness part fills out automatically from other P10. It shows the amount of principal balance that you're holding at the end of the fiscal year by each type of debt. And then it also shows what is my general obligation debt limit that I can legally borrow. The general obligation debt limit for any city in Iowa is you can borrow principal not to exceed 5% of your assessed value of your city. So the entire assessed value after military and homestead exemptions, that times 0.05 is the amount of debt that you can hold, and amount of principal debt that you can hold as a general obligation of the city at any time. So that does not include revenue debt or other types of debt. It just means general obligation debt. So my general obligation debt showing here should be lower than my general obligation debt limit. If it's not, we could have a problem, okay? All right, any questions about those pages before we, especially the debt pages, before we go into completing the AFR and I give you back your Saturday? I know I'm over, but please, if you have questions, ask them.
It's not debt related, Ted, but we do have a question.
Oh, great, what do we got?
Employee wages include anyone that worked that year, correct? Including any
Correct.
that may have since left.
Correct, even if they've since left. We are backward facing, so they worked during the fiscal year being reported, so you report their wages. Because this is a statement of actual expenditures. You spent money on their wages during the year. You won't be spending money on their wages the next year, but we don't care about that. We only care that you did spend money on their wages during the year being reported.
All right, perfect. That's all we have.
That's it? Oh, wow. Okay, you guys are either asleep or ahead of the curve. All right, so let's talk about completing and submitting. Once you've completed your AFR, and again, remember, your AFR isn't complete until you've completed the other P10 page and your ending balance ties out to your accounting software. Your revenues tie out, your expenditures tie out. Okay, once you've gotten to there, we can talk about completing the AFR. And here's a statement of what I've just told you. Make sure that you are checking that everything ties out and that you're not just slapping numbers in and presenting that as good enough, all right? Every year I will have a city who presents me numbers, and then I'll get to budget time and I'll look at it and I'll be like, this doesn't make any sense. Why do you have no beginning balance and your ending balance is, like $30? And they'll say, well, my ending balance wasn't $30. It was actually thousands of dollars. It's just my AFR doesn't show it. Why does your AFR not show it? Well, I don't know. Don't be that guy, right? Make sure that you're tying out your ending balances to your ledger, you're tying out your revenues and expenditures to your ledger, and that you're getting your inconsistencies in those numbers figured out before you ever hand it over, okay? Don't ignore places where it doesn't match. If you need help finding out why it doesn't match, I'm here, the league's here, there's other cities that will help you out. You gotta pop your head up and say, I'm having a problem, because we can't figure it out unless you tell us, right? Ask me as many questions as you wanna ask me. I generally don't get annoyed with you if you ask a lot of questions. I want to answer questions, right? The Auditor of State's office wants to answer questions. The league wants to answer questions. So don't feel like you're being a burden. You're not. We want you asking questions because we want to keep you as a clerk. So we don't have enough clerks. And again, another statement, review your AFR with your council and your mayor. You don't have to do it before you submit it. You can submit it first and then review it with them at your December meeting if you're running tight on time. It's a good idea to review it with them before you submit if you can. But remember, December 1 deadline. It's a very, very, very good idea to have your council and mayor review it in open meeting. You do have to publish or post it. And again, we talked about this earlier. You have to clear all of your errors before you can publish or post it. It will give you guidance as to where the error is and hopefully some information on how to fix it. On that All Funds P1 page at the very bottom, there's a place where you have to enter your submission information about who prepared it. That's the blue space where it says printed name of preparer. Type in the name of the person that prepared it, whether that was the city clerk, the city manager, the city finance officer, or an outside accountant. Doesn't matter. Put in the name of the person who prepared it, or who's going to be responsible for answering my questions and the public's questions. Put in the phone number. It can be a general phone number for the city. That's fine, or your direct phone number. The date that this is being signed, not the date that it's being published. The date that it's being signed should be put in under where it says date signed. You can see that there are two kind of tannish spaces, one above the printed name of the preparer, one below the printed name of the preparer. This has to be signed by the preparer and by the mayor in every city, okay? Mayor has to sign, preparer has to sign. A lot of times this will be city clerk and mayor, or city finance officer and mayor. That's normally what it's gonna be, but it could also be outside accounting firm representative and mayor. That's fine, okay? You have to publish or post this before you can submit it, okay? The rule is the same as the rule for when you have to publish or post public notices, okay? So if you're a city of 200 or below in population, you just have to post this at 3 locations inside your city. Those 3 locations should be set by ordinance, and they should be the same 3 locations every time, right? If you're over 200 in population, so you're 201 or above in population, you must publish in a newspaper of general circulation in the city, okay? So those you should already have established. There is no 4 and 20 for this, okay? Because remember, timelines changed this year. Now there's no more 10 and 20 timeline. It's only everything is 4 and 20, except for this. This doesn't have to have a public hearing, so you just have to publish it, okay? I could publish this in September and not have my council review it until December, and I'm still fine. And I can submit it after I publish it. So if I publish it in September, even if I didn't have my council review it, I can still submit it. As long as I've published it and I've got my proof of publication back, or I've filled out my posting affidavit page. If you are 200 and less in population, you will get what is called a publication affidavit page, okay? That will show up as one of the pages of your AFR. That is a page that gives you 3 locations where you posted it. You have to type in the 3 locations where it was posted and put in your name, the name of the person who is attesting to the fact that these were printed in or posted in the 3 locations. And then put in the date that you signed this, stating that it was properly posted in these 3 locations. The posting date will be on the front page, on the All Funds P1 page, same as the publication date, okay? If you are a publishing city, so you're 201 and above, you will get a affidavit, not an affidavit anymore, now it's just a statement of publication from your newspaper that you will submit to me, saying it was published on this date and here's what was published, okay? Once you have published or posted, or once you're ready to publish or post, I should say, this is before you publish or post, you will click the Publish Posting button. Now, if you are an affidavit city, so if you're 200 and below, make sure you have this filled out, your posting affidavit page, before you click Publish Posting. Because once I click Publish Posting, everything in the report locks down. So I want to make sure I fill out my 3 locations and my printed name and my date of signature before I hit Publish Posting. But then I hit Publish Posting, and it'll bring up a pop-up box that says, all right, when is this being published, or when is this being posted? What date? So you have to enter the date that it's going to appear in the newspaper, or the date that it is going to be posted at the 3 locations inside your city. So if you're publishing in a newspaper, make sure you've worked out with the newspaper ahead of time which day this will be in the newspaper, because that has to match your publication notice that you submit to us after the fact. So once you put in your date, you click Submit. It will bring up a print screen that will show your published notice, and your published notice is basically the All Funds P1 page without the signature block on it. We don't want the signature block on it for publication in the newspaper. We just want the numbers. So it'll give you that. Don't be thrown by that. That's by design. You can then save this as a PDF. Save it as a PDF so that you can email it directly to your publisher. Even if you are a posting city, I would save it as a PDF and then print the PDF. Okay? That makes it a little bit easier of a process. All right? Once it's completed, once you have published it in the newspaper or posted it, you need a signed copy of the All Funds P1 page, remember signed by the person who prepared it and the mayor. And then you need your proof of posting signed, or your proof of publication that you got from the newspaper. Once you have those items, you can then either mail it, so give us the printed copy that's been signed and mail it directly to the Auditor of State's office right there, room 111, State Capitol Building in Des Moines. Or you can upload it electronically. You can scan the signed copy in, create a file, a PDF or a JPEG file out of that, if you've got a scanner in your office, and then you can upload it using that Documents button that I showed you earlier in the presentation, okay? So once you click on Documents, you get that pop-up. Each of those slots are for a different page. The signed All Funds P1 page goes in the top, the proof of publication or affidavit of posting goes in the bottom, right? So you click Choose File for each of those. Choose File for All Funds P1, choose File for Proof of Publication. Do them one at a time, put in the separate files that you've scanned in. Once you do that, you click on the blue Upload button at the bottom, and then it will upload them into our system, okay? Once these are uploaded, it'll say down at the bottom, it'll say document available for download or something like that. And then you know you're good to go. okay? Once you've done that, you've completed your AFR and you are ready to move on with your life and go into the budget. It's due December 1st. Do not go past December 1st, all right? Make sure you have it done by then. Any last questions? Otherwise, that's everything I've got.
Nothing's popped into the chat bar yet.
Okay. I don't see anything else in chat or in Q&A, so again, if you have questions, my contact info is readily available on our website. Otherwise, it's my first name dot my last name at DOM for Department of Management.iowa.gov. Or my phone number, direct line is 515-281-3705. That goes right to my desk or my voicemail if I'm not there. So you can always reach me at those two locations. Happy to take questions any way you've got them. Don't be shy about asking, especially if you are new. Make sure that you're asking questions. That's the only way to learn. Don't just sit there in baffled silence or bang your head against the wall. That doesn't do me any good. That doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do the state any good. All right, one last second to ask any questions you might have. Okay.
Okay, perfect. We will have the follow-up materials out on Monday after our team has a second to get the video and everything together. So we'll get that to your inbox. And Ted, we can include your contact information in that as well.
Please do. Yeah, please do. And also, one plug I will give also, in addition to the recording that we're doing here, I have on my website, dom.iowa.gov, again, under the city resources. So you go to local governments and hover over it, and then city resources is an option, click that. On that city resources page, there is both a budget walkthrough video series that breaks it down by pieces, and then there is a AFR video walkthrough series that breaks it down into pieces. Now, the AFR one I haven't updated with the new debt detail stuff, but everything else on it's still good. So if you have questions, you can always go there too if you can't find your link to the league stuff. And then again, there's always directions in the system, written directions.
Alrighty, still no additional questions. So I guess that means you aced the role of teacher there, Ted.
Either or I bored everyone to tears, which is also possible. So.
Well, I like my version of events better. Alrighty, everybody, I'll stop the recording and you can have your Saturday back. So thank you so much for joining us. And like I said, again, we'll get this out on Monday and include Ted's contact information. If you have any other additional questions, feel free to respond to that email as well. And we will do what we can to get you connected and get you some answers. So thanks, guys.